Good evening, and welcome to this candidate forum on diversity, equity, and inclusion, co-sponsored by the Hingham Unity Council and the Hingham Special Education Parent Advisory Council, or known as CPAC. This evening, we will feature candidates from 4 different races: School Committee, Board of Assessors, Board of Health, and Sewer Commission. We are fortunate to have all the candidates in person here tonight. My name is Andrew Turner. My wife Jody and I live in Hingham with our 2 wonderful kids, Jack and Dylan, and our rascally but sweet dog, Molly. I am a member of the Hingham Unity Council, and I'm honored to be able to moderate this event. Before we get started, I'd like to provide you with some background on our group. Hingham Unity Council is a nonpartisan, nonprofit group formed to facilitate open, respectful, in-person dialogue about systemic issues that affect human dignity, with the goal of creating a more inclusive and welcoming community. We are part of the South Shore Unity Council. We always welcome new members, so please visit our website at hinghamunity.org for upcoming events and more information on ways to get involved. We're also thrilled to be partnering with CPAC for this event. CPAC is composed of parents and guardians of children who receive special education services from Hingham Public Schools, and all parents and/or guardians of children receiving special education services through Hingham Public Schools are eligible voting members of Hingham CPAC. This includes parents and/or guardians of children on IEPs and 504 plans. To learn more about CPAC, please visit their website at hinghamcpac.org. Finally, I'd like to encourage people to attend 2 upcoming events. On Thursday, May 12th at 7 p.m., the HUC Community Book Read and Discussion will focus on New York Times bestseller and National Book Award winner Interior Chinatown, which I have here. It's a great book. An exploration of the Asian American experience, assimilation, how pop culture portrays race, and the roles we are often forced to play in an original and witty police procedural screenplay turned novel format. It's actually very good. You'll love it. Please register on the HUC website if you're interested. Secondly, #WeAreHingham is a community-based visual project created by local resident photographer and HUC volunteer Brooke Bartletta to showcase the diverse portraits and personalities of community members. On Sunday, May 22nd at 2 p.m., HUC invites all who live, work, study, or worship in Hingham to come together in person at the Jane Cheever Carr Amphitheater at the South Shore Conservatory and participate in small, moderated groups that will engage in open dialogue about their individual and collective experiences of our town. Special guest Leora Norwich, Executive Director of the Network for Social Justice, is planning and facilitating this event with HUC volunteers. Okay, let's get started. The candidates have been fully apprised of the format and ground rules, but for the benefit of our audience, I will give a quick overview. Each candidate will briefly introduce themselves for up to 2 minutes in ballot order. I will then ask them questions. All of the questions for this event have been provided in advance to all of the candidates with input from across the community, and thank you to those of you that have submitted questions. Candidates will have up to 1 minute and 45 seconds to answer each question. Rebuttals for individual questions will not be allowed. At the end of the Q&A session, I will invite each candidate to make a closing statement in reverse ballot order for 90 seconds. We will have a timekeeper to help us stay on track, and if you see the stop sign, please do your best to finish promptly. Since we are starting late this evening, we will not have any breaks between sessions, so buckle up. With those logistics out of the way, let's get started. Our first forum this evening is for the School Committee. We will start with the opening statements from each candidate. Candidates, please remember to unmute, and then you may begin your opening statement. We will proceed in ballot order, and Ness, we will start with you. When you're ready, you have 2 minutes.
Hi, I'm Ness Carenti. I am running for re-election to the School Committee. I am so excited for this evening. Thank you to the Hingham Unity Council and Hingham CPAC for hosting such a special evening. I am incredibly passionate about the issues that we are diving into tonight. Issues relating to equity and human dignity are my absolute passion. And what I'm about to share with you may shock some, but it's the reality of who I am. It defines me and it drives my passion. When I was 13, my dad had gender reassignment surgery, came home not telling us. And so we were left with a dad who was now a woman. My mom was a house mom of 4 kids. She quickly went right back to work. She was a house cleaner. Really proud of her. She struggled her whole life and raised the 4 kids on her own. And it really defines who I am and why I'm passionate about this, because I realized as I was in school, I was always nervous and timid about what people thought of me. And then it dawned on me when I was about 16 that, there's nothing wrong with what my dad did. And there was nothing wrong with who I was. And so it really formed who I was and why I think the way that I think today. It's part of my mom being a single house mom. We spent a lot of time at the Boys and Girls Club. There were 2 very influential women who worked there. They did a lot of volunteer work. They brought us camping and skiing and exposed me to some of the things that I would not have been able to do. And it is because of them that I am passionate about volunteering my time and giving back. So I went to Babson, became an accountant, worked at PwC for over 15 years. And when I left PwC to stay home with my kids, that's when I really dove into everything that relates to volunteering in the kids' schools. And I try to give back with my profession. So given I'm an accountant, I give back in that way. But again, my passion is the human dignity. And I share this with you because we are part of a community and my story exists here in Hingham. Guardians, caregivers, faculty and staff all deserve the right to be fully seen, authenticated, and affirmed. The sense of belonging is a basic human need, which must be met in order for any member to reach their full potential. And I could talk on and on about this for ages. So I will try to watch my time, but feel free to reach out to me anytime if you want to dive into the issues any further. Thank you.
Thank you, Ness. I'd like to welcome Allie next to make an opening statement. Allie, you'll have 2 minutes.
Okay. Thank you. Hello, I'm Allison Anderson, and I'm very honored to be participating tonight in this HUC and CPAC forum. The work that you do for our community is so important, and it's much needed. And I am committing to continuing that work and advocating for both of your groups. It's been a really hard few years for everyone, and I think that what you both do is just really needed right now within our community to help us heal and move ahead. A little bit about myself. I grew up in Hingham. I went through the Hingham public school system, and I made the choice to return and raise my family here. I'm a strong believer and supporter of public education. I graduated in 1993, so just a few years ago, and I currently have 3 sons in the system. I have one at Hingham High School, one in the middle school, and one at South Elementary School. I've advocated within our schools for over a decade in regards to safely reopening the schools over the last few years, class selection and leveling options, and for the arts, as well as in many other areas. My family's lived on the South Shore for generations. We have a legacy of public service. My grandfather, Lester Gates, was a local business owner. He was also a state representative, and I deeply respect our public servants. I am keenly aware of what it takes to serve. I know it isn't simply about attending meetings and serving on committees. It's about rolling up your sleeves and actually doing the work. Our Hingham schools stand on a really strong foundation, but there's a lot of work to be done. And my intention is to continue doing that and put our students at the forefront of it. What I believe our schools need to move forward are improved communications, a stronger sense of community, and a really clear course of action. Right now, I'm sitting on the Strategic Plan Committee, and I think that will help direct where we go as a community and as a district. These objectives are the cornerstone of my campaign. And as I answer your questions and we get deeper into it, I will elaborate a lot on some of the things I just mentioned, why it's needed, and why and how I believe we need to plot our course forward for the Hingham schools. Thank you.
I will now welcome Matt. We have 2 Matts. We have Matt Cosman and Matt LeBreton. I'd now like to welcome Matt C. Matt Cosman, please. 2 minutes for your opening statement.
Thanks, Andrew, and thanks to everyone from the Hingham Unity Council and CPAC for having us. So my name is Matt Cosman. My wife and I actually both grew up in town and graduated from Hingham High School. I graduated in 97. My wife graduated in 98. She's actually one of the co-chairs of CPAC and is a special education teacher as well. We have 3 children in the public schools. My son is at the middle school in 6th grade, and we have 2 daughters in 5th and 2nd grade at Foster School. After high school, I went to Colgate University, did 4 years of work at PricewaterhouseCoopers and got my MBA from Kellogg. And have worked at Fidelity Investments for the last 15 years. The first 14 years of that, I was a part of an internal business strategy consulting group, where I spent the last 7 years of that tenure as part of our senior leadership team. In the last year, I've transitioned into a managing director role, where I'm helping to lead relationships with some of our largest institutional clients. All of this work has had me dealing with data, dealing with ambiguity, making strategic recommendations, and managing relationships with key stakeholders, whether we agree or disagree on the approach forward. So why am I running for school committee? I care passionately about the schools. I care passionately about this town. And while I wholly respect the tireless effort the current school committee has given over the past couple of years and before that, I do think there's things that need to improve. There's 3 areas in terms of the how that I think are important. The first is I think we need to have more open and rigorous debate as a school committee. I think we need to hold our leaders to a higher level of accountability. And I think we need to work even more collaboratively with other boards like the Select Board and AdCom. I have 4 key priorities in terms of the what. First is communication. I think we need to have stronger communication as a school committee and at the district level. The budget is incredibly important. And while we need to fill gaps, we also need to make sure we're managing it in a responsible way, given a potential override. We need to focus on learning loss and social and emotional well-being with actionable plans at the secondary and elementary school level. And fourth, we need to focus on special education as we're not meeting the students' services in many cases. I'm looking forward to the hour tonight, and thank you.
And last but not least, I would like to welcome Matt LeBreton, onto the screen for a 2-minute opening statement. Matt, whenever you're ready.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate it. And thanks, everyone, for having me here tonight and giving me this opportunity to speak. I want to start by giving a little bit about my background, but I won't be too long with that. I moved here 13 years ago with my wife, Michelle. We have 3 kids, 1 in the high school, 1 in the middle school, 1 in the elementary school. My background, I grew up very differently than how we live, or most of us live in Hingham today. My mother had me when she was 17. My father was a drug addict and abusive and left our home. And one constant in my life were teachers. Another was my mother. But that helped form, like has been said earlier, the way you are raised and what you're around helps form who you are and your opinions and thoughts on things. And so that has given me this perspective that I have that I want to bring into this race relative to the whole community, what we are as a whole Hingham. The school committee, we're vitally important. This is about working with our kids within our community to take the next level and to continue to strive and move forward. And I think everybody that's here tonight vying for these seats, we all have that same intent. And I think that's a real benefit to the community. But instead of continuing on about myself, what I would like to do is thank both the Unity Council and CPAC for having us here today. And for a reason, I think both organizations have done something very important in this community. And that is you've asked hard questions. The Unity Council, you've made us look at ourselves as a community and digest how we do things, how words, actions, deeds matter and impact kids and others. And I think that's really critical. And CPAC, you've done the same thing. You've done it differently in different ways, but you've asked hard questions and you've put it to the administrators and others to make sure that all of our kids, regardless of where they may be on their educational spectrum or their educational foundation, are heard and get an opportunity for the education they deserve. So I want to thank both of you organizations for putting us all on the spot in a positive, good way. To me, that's unity, bringing out the best we have in a community to serve each other. So thank you.
Thank you, Matt. I'll actually ask Matt if you want to stay on screen. Stephanie is our capable tech leader. So I'll tell you who we want on the screen, and then I'll begin with the first question so we can kind of get set up. For the benefit of the audience, we have 6 questions total tonight. As a reminder, all these questions were sent to the candidates in advance. Candidates will have 1 minute and 45 seconds to respond. I will read the question, sort of the long form question at the beginning, and in the interest of time, we'll just kind of repeat just the end part for each candidate before we allow them the opportunity to address the voters. So Matt, thanks for staying on. I'll start with the first question here. It's about the Hingham Draft Master Plan. The draft Hingham Master Plan states that, quote, in 2035, Hingham will be a place that provides excellent schools and supports families by meeting the needs of children and youth, offering a wide range of recreation, athletic, social, and cultural activities, end quote. The report offers 2 policy recommendations. The first, continue to make the replacement of the current foster school a top priority. And the second one is to encourage robust participation in the school committee's strategic planning process to fund excellent educational programs and update school buildings. So the question for all the candidates is, what are your reactions to these recommendations? And is there anything you'd change or add? Matt, when you're ready.
Sure. So my reaction is I agree with them. Yes, I mean, foster, we need to continue to move forward, and we need the entire community to embrace that. And I think we're doing that. And there's so much about that foster school that is so good that sort of ties into so many things here. But to finally have some classrooms in elementary school designed specifically for working with kids with special needs and language learning disabilities, I think that is really a positive step forward. When we talk about the plan itself, I think it's important that we note that the plan is one plan of many in our community. We have the school strategic plan, the sustainable budget task force. So we've got to work to make sure all of these pieces come together. When I started in this campaign, before I was sure I was going to be a candidate, I went out and talked to about 70, 80 different people to get their perspective on things, whether they agreed with me or not. And I will tell you that one thing that came back is that people want to participate. I think we continue to give those opportunities. We need to continue to have them there. And I, frankly, when it comes to parents in the process, and I believe building excellent educational programs, we need that input to continue. And there's only so much I think that a school committee can do to ensure that every parent is there. But one of the key points, I think, is an open, communicative, transparent process for all involved. So people can see that if you make decision A, decision B gets impacted, et cetera. I think I'm down to ons left. I'm not sure what that's. But I just have a couple of seconds left. But, I think, look, at the end of the day, we have a lot of planning. But when we're talking about kids, whether we're talking about kids from a special needs perspective or from another, they don't have the time for a 3 to 5 year plan. So we've got to work to these plans. We've got to get them, and we've got to hold each other accountable to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. By my clock, you're actually right on time. So nice work. For the benefit of the candidates and for the folks that are watching, we will have a little reminder when there's 30 seconds left. The intent is not to shoo you off the screen. It's just to be prompt. So please finish as you can. I'll invite Ness up next. And Ness, the question, just to prompt you again, is about the Hingham Draft Master Plan. What are your reactions to the recommendations in that plan? And is there anything you change or add?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. It ties to right now. Sorry, can you hear me? Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're breaking up. You're breaking up a little bit, but it's okay. We're gonna deal with the tech issues. Take your time. Everything okay? We could have them all night. That's okay. Just whenever you're ready, we can hear you now.
Clearly, my kids are on the Wi-Fi as well, so we'll have to get this figured out. So I think it's a great question. It ties into what we are doing right now with our strategic plan. In short, we are not there. The master plan talks about the year 2035. That's 13 years from now. And we only get kids in the public education K through 12 years for 13 years. So we're talking about a master plan that is one child's entire academic career, and it's not enough. And so I know that there's an urgency, and we need to figure this out, which ties into the strategic plan that we are doing as a district. So I'm on the strategic plan committee. The last time we did it was in 2016. And back then it was set for 5 years. It was a plan that was done internally. This time we are using a consulting firm, and we realized that 5 years is just way too long. There are so many changes that happen in 5 years. So when we are setting up the strategic plan for the district, we're envisioning for the next 3 years, because we know how quickly the world changes. Therefore, we have to be ready to pivot. I think we have excellent teachers and educators. We need to support them. We need to provide them the funding and resources that they desperately need. We hear about this public education crisis that is happening nationally, and I hate to say it, it's here in Hingham. Teachers are retiring and leaving the profession, and there's not as many people going into the profession to replace them. So we need to support them as much as possible. And I don't know if that's enough time.
Yeah,
I'm
right on
sorry.
time.
I didn't see the
Right on
code. But yeah, like I said, we're seeing the same thing. Okay, sorry. I'm going to try and move in the next question.
No problem. Thanks, Ness. Okay, next I'll welcome Allie onto the screen, into the forum. Just again, what are your reactions to the recommendations from the Hingham Draft Master Plan, the Draft Hingham Master Plan, and is there anything you'd change or add?
Thank you. Yeah, just to start, 2035 is a long ways off. So while I really appreciate that the strategic plan and the talk of replacing foster school are highlighted as priorities, they both must have to be accomplished in the near term. These aren't things that can wait till 2035. Like Ness, I am sitting on the strategic plan committee as one of the parent representatives, and we're charged with overseeing the creation of a 3-year strategic plan. It's not a 13-year plan. It's going to happen and be implemented within the next 3 years. And part of this is creating a clear course of action for our school system with really tangible goals and timelines. But make no mistake about it, once this document is complete, that's when the work actually starts. So we're aiming to complete this by June 6th. And present it to the school committee, but that's when the real work will start with implementing it. And that work has to involve parents in the community on an ongoing basis. They have to see what the goals are. They have to see what's being measured, how it's being acted upon, and they have to be a continuous part of that process. And part of the goal of the plan is really to think about how we include everybody in the community, both within the planning, but also the recommendations. So from arts to athletics, academics, CPAC, LGBTQ+, families of colors, et cetera, they all have to be represented and have their place in this. Same with Farce to School. The current timeline estimates completion in September 2024. So we have to work towards opening then. The kids right now are sitting in classrooms with coats on in an art class because it's too cold. So that creates a lot of inequities in our district, and it's really unfortunate. Hopefully we can get this generation of schools through. And then finally, just to wrap up, these examples lead to a broader point. It's important that the school committee and the town don't view these as checkboxes. These aren't just things to complete and move on. They're iterative, they're important, and we need to learn the lessons from Foster and not sit on things too long and wait for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Allie. To round out the first question, I'll invite Matt C. onto the screen and repeat it quickly for you, Matt. What are your reactions to the recommendations from the Draft Hingham Master Plan? And is there anything you'd change or add?
Yeah, so I think both are clearly critical. When my friends went to school, to foster school in the 1980s, the school was in need of being rebuilt. And so 40 years later, we certainly need to do that. And I agree with what Matt LeBreton said. I think we're on a good path and that's going to happen. So that's good. In terms of the strategic plan, part of the statement is around robust participation. I think we did an okay job with that. I think we tried with the survey to get input. Unfortunately, the survey wasn't constructed in a way that was particularly easy to fill out. And so I think we did miss a little bit of an opportunity to get that robust participation in the strategic plan. That's a little bit unfortunate, but I do think the strategic plan will be a good input. And I would echo what some others said. While these two, I think, are good, important things that we need to do, they're a bit narrow. So I do think we need, more and a bigger goal around some of the things I already talked about. I think we need to have a grander goal around holding people to accountability, stronger communication, much more focus on the budget. I think that will enable, I guess, us getting after the strategic plan that will start, as Ali said, on June 6th. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Matt. Great. So we made it through our first question, working out the kinks here. Everyone's doing great. Thank you for your patience as we keep going here. We'll start with our second question. This one has to do with IEP statistics and COVID. And we're going to start with Ness if we want to bring Ness up just as I read this to get the tech ready. Here's the question. In the last 2 years, IEP enrollment has significantly increased. In 2021, there were 522 evaluations submitted, up from 295 in 2020. As of January 2022, we have 654 students on active IEPs, 406 students on active 504 plans, and 42 students out of district. The question, as for you and for all the candidates, is, do you believe COVID policies disproportionately affected our special education and or low-income students? And if so, how would you address this going forward?
Yep. Thanks for the question. Yes. So COVID impacted all our students, but especially the special ed and low income students. During the pandemic, the district had to respond to state and federal mandates, which unfortunately meant learning over a computer screen. Definitely not an ideal situation. Low income students didn't necessarily have the same connection tools or the space in their homes to effectively learn. Some parents who had to be out of the house so that they could work. And students with disabilities, they couldn't get their services that they needed. And it wasn't effective if they did get them over a screen. I know from my own hearing issues, I tend to read lips, so I didn't realize what an issue that was until COVID hit. But going forward, the school committee needs to continue to ensure that we're providing the right support and resources. We need to have the right staff in place. We have been a district that has run very lean, and we're working on getting the resources and the funding so that we can continue to support the teachers. Last year, we added 32 positions. These positions were primarily set up for the Hingham tiered system of support. The educators knew that that was the structure that was needed in order to better support the students. We just needed the funding to do it. We were fortunate that the town supported the addition of these positions during last year's town meeting. The education budget had a unanimous support. And this year we're hearing that the data tells us that the positions are actually starting to work. From a special ed perspective, we need to do a better job of including parents in the process of coming up with an educational plan. Legally, parents are members of the team who make decisions about the student's educational plan, as they should be. And so therefore, they need to be a key part of remediating their child's special ed. So thank you.
Thank you, Ness. Right on time. I appreciate it. Allie, I'll ask you to come up next, and I'll repeat the question. Do you believe COVID policies disproportionately affected our special education and or low-income students? And if so, how would you address this going forward?
Thank you, Andrew. I think we'd all agree that COVID presented educational challenges to students across the board. But yes, I do also believe that certain populations were disproportionately impacted, particularly in the area of remote learning. And I've heard story after story from parents about the impacts of COVID on their children's education. There's students across the district whose disabilities made it just impossible to access the remote curriculum. So solutions like attending remote classes within the school buildings weren't necessarily afforded to all. And even though still required remote attendance from within the school. And at the middle school, it often required that students actually had to drop music electives, which compounded some of the inequities. Issues like technology support and supervision also presented challenges for them. I mean, and just think about some of the situations we had. We had students who were traveling to Hingham to attend school, and because of the federal mandates for COVID safety, they had to travel with the windows open. So put yourself in that situation in the middle of winter. It's freezing cold. The school provided blankets, but it's early morning, freezing cold, riding in on a long drive, spending the day in school, and then having to go back home on that same bus with the windows open. And it just doesn't make for a good learning environment. And I think we'd all probably have that impact our ability to learn. And so there's a lot of things that need to be done to bridge those gaps. I believe there are immediate actions that can be taken. You hear all the time about the struggles with executive functioning throughout the student population. I think we should implement some executive functioning skills curriculum for all of our schools, but especially at the middle and the high school. And these could be offered as after-school supports, as well as some social skills groups to just help bridge some of the immediate gaps that we're seeing. So I think those are some ways we can quickly address some things as we look to then fill the longer-term needs that these students have. Thank you.
Thanks, Allie. Next up will be Matt C. The question is, do you believe COVID policies disproportionately affected our special education and or low-income students? And if so, how would you address this going forward?
Yeah, so thinking back to 2 years ago, I was originally supportive of the minimal in-person return to school plans that we came up with, given the lack of information we had at our disposal around safety as well as the ability for how remote learning would work. Within a couple of months, it became clear to me and others that we needed to have much more concrete and realistic plans to get our kids back into school in a much more significant way. And I advocated strongly for that because the trade-offs for learning loss and social and emotional well-being were just too much. So yeah, I mean, I think COVID policies affected all of our students, but I think they did disproportionately affect special ed and low income, and probably some other students as well. I think the younger children, kindergarten, first graders, probably the older children, 12th graders were impacted more. The reality is remote learning and the safety protocols we had in place were difficult enough for everyone. Your neurotypical student or your student with a family that had the ability to hire tutors or have multiple parents at working from home and helping their students get through the day. For special ed and low income, they may not have had those same services. And we know our special education students lost hours that they will never get back of critical services during the pandemic. So yeah, what can we do? I alluded to this earlier, but I think it's really important that we have specific actionable plans, whether that's hiring more counselors at the elementary school level, focusing on the reading instruction for those now second and third graders that missed out in kindergarten and first grade, or getting more executive functioning skills for our middle school and early high schoolers. I realize this isn't easy, but I think we need to have very specific plans and measurable outcomes that we put in place to help these students. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. And Matt L., lastly, I'll repeat the question for you as well. Do you believe COVID policies disproportionately affected our special education and or low-income students? And if so, how would you address this going forward?
Well, thank you for the question. Look, I think anytime you have an interruption in the delivery of a routine service set, whether it's school or societally, it's going to impact those on the lower end of the economic scale greatly. Just like we see with gas prices impacting, they all impact us, but those that are on the razor's edge of poverty, that impacts them. And for kids with special needs or on an IEP or a 504, yeah, that disruption was real. One of my daughters came off an IEP the week before COVID shutdown. Did that impact her? Yes. But the reality is we as a family had the ability to get tutors and do some other things like many families in Hingham could do. So rather than look back though on this, I want to look forward as to what we can do to help with these services. Should we be in a situation where we have an interruption again? But we've got to do everything we can to make sure that we have resources in the classroom for students, whether special on special needs or on an IEP or not. But we've got to do things like we've got to take a look at the pay for paras. Right? You know, a barista at Starbucks, God bless them, but with tips, they make more than a para in our schools today. That is not setting up our kids, all kids in the classroom, for success when we can't have predictability within that framework, and we can't have the best and brightest at the para level working with our kids. So they're, leveling for kids with special needs. You hear a lot about this from talking to folks. We have got to provide and meet children where they are. And if we have to give them services in one area of their life, we can still completely celebrate where they can thrive in other areas. And we need to provide that opportunity. I think I've heard a statistic that there's not a kid on an IEP in Hingham that is in an AP class. That's got to change. And I think we can make that change. And those types of systemic change in our schools when we're not in a pandemic will help us should we hit a bump in the road down the line. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. And thanks everyone for that question. We'll start with our third one, and I will introduce it here. This is about assessing Hingham Public Schools' performance on diversity. And gratefully, it's a question from a member of the Hingham community. So thank you folks for your questions. We're working those into the evening tonight, and we greatly appreciate your participation. This one, we're going to start with Allie. And here's the question. On diversity, Hingham Public Schools scores a C- in school ratings. This is based on, quote, racial and economic diversity and survey responses on school culture and diversity, close quote. What are your ideas for improving our school culture so that all children feel included and that they belong in Hingham?
This is a tough question for me, having grown up here. So having gone through the Hingham schools, I've seen the evolution of the culture within our schools. And I guess I should say that a different way. I have seen the lack of evolution of the culture within our schools. And it's frustrating to see that, and it's upsetting because this is such a beautiful town. But at the same time, there is still a culture of resistance to change here, which is really interesting when you come back because you assume that it will have changed, and it really hasn't. I recently was speaking with one of the student leaders at the high school, and it's clear that the students don't always feel welcome or that they can comfortably be themselves. And this has to change. The last few months, we've had the drama club feel too uncomfortable to perform in front of the whole school due to incidents in the school. We've heard about racially based incidents. I've heard stories about students being ridiculed for bringing a music instrument onto the bus in the morning, and children being teased because they're seen entering the language lab at the middle school. So I would challenge anyone to say that these make our school culture feel inclusive. So we have to come up with a way to fix it. I think we need a cultural reset. The mindset within the school really needs to change. But to succeed, it has to have buy-in from parents, from administrators and teachers, and from the students themselves. I think the strategic plan really needs to build inclusivity and equity into all aspects. It'd be useful if our guidance counselors were more specialized so that they could help students focus on the path that was most meaningful for them, not necessarily a traditional college path. Groups like the Hingham Arts Alliance, which is just announced their launch, are really exciting because they can help to support the arts programs and really celebrate those students. And I think we all need to look inward a little bit and hold not only ourselves accountable, but everyone in our school district to the same standards, regardless of what activities or sports or classes they take. We can't have different rules for different groups. And then finally, as adults, we need to listen to the students. We need to understand their perspectives and what they're feeling and where they're seeing challenges within the schools. And, once we're better informed about that, I think we can find better ways to move ahead.
Thank you, Allie. Matt C., I'll ask you up next, and I'll repeat the question. What are your ideas for improving our school culture so that all children feel included and that they belong in Hingham?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, the reality is that Hingham in general does not have great racial and economic diversity now, or probably in its history, and the school board is not going to be able to change that. But I think what the demographic of the town, but I think they can help influence what's happening within the schools as it pertains to students of color, their race, gender, sexual orientation, learning profile, economic status, all of the economic status, and all of those things. And hopefully that can help encourage more and more people to come to town and have a more diverse town. The survey results, obviously, and from talking to other people, show we're just not good enough here, and it's not acceptable. I think we need to recognize that this is a long journey. I know for myself, through over the last decade, I've been on my own allyship journey, and where I've come to understand better, not enough, but better, what it means and the privilege I've been given from being white and male and heterosexual and growing up in a two-parent household with economic means. And so I've made some progress, but I need to do more. So we need to understand that people are going to be in very different places. But I think the schools have done some things in terms of trainings. I think that's good to start. But I think the biggest thing we can do is work with leadership at the leadership level of the buildings to ensure that there is an expectation that is being set and modeled for that whole building that the students can see. We need to encourage students, teachers, administration to call out actions where this isn't happening. And to ensure that we have this inclusive environment and ensure there's consequences, whether it's big or small, whether it's a big or small incident, when those happen. And we should celebrate successes because there have been some, not enough. We should make sure we're celebrating those as well. So it's going to be a long journey, but this is clearly an area where we need to improve significantly. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Matt L., I'll invite you next to respond to this question from a member of the Hingham community. What are your ideas for improving our school culture so that all children feel included and that they belong in Hingham?
Well, thank you for the question. This hits home to me at a very personal level because, as a chubby 11-year-old kid with then bright red hair and freckles all over his face, who never went to the same school, lived in the same place for more than a year, I was always the new kid. And again, that chubby, freckle-faced, redheaded kid got picked on quite a bit. So, I know how hard that can be as an individual. And I'm not even trying to make light of things. That made me feel really horrible at times about myself for reasons that had nothing to do with who I am as a person. But as was said earlier, I could process that through. And I was fortunate enough to grow up with a supportive mother who said to me, an education is the key for your chance at a greater life than what I've ever had. But I got to do that as a white male in our society. And so I think recognizing that not everybody has that same, playing field or opportunity based on factors that aren't theirs is really an important piece. And I think that's why we're all here, is I think we do recognize that. But look, I think when it comes to changing a culture in the schools, it's been talked about. This is Hingham is who we are. We have, based on the report that came out yesterday, we have 10% of our population is non-white. We're not doing great academically. We're getting a C- here, at least on that survey. We're getting a C- on this one. We've got to bring, as a school committee, two things. I think we've got to empower students and give them the ability to really tackle these problems from their perspective, not from ours, and provide them that open forum. But I also think from a leadership perspective in our community, we've got to do more around affordable housing. We've got to do more about encouraging this community to set up a paradigm that allows people who are different than us economically, racially, and in other ways to have an opportunity to be a part of this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Last up for this question is Ness. Ness, I'll invite you to answer this question. What are your ideas for improving our school culture so that all children feel included and that they belong in Hingham?
Great question. We know what the makeup of our schools are, and they're not even close to what the U.S. looks like. It's not even close to what the state looks like, for that matter. As an example, we have 1.9% of our population in Hingham. As the students go who identify as African American, the makeup at the state level is 9.3. The fact that we can name the diverse families in our town tells me we are not diverse. I think the first step is something that is currently underway. The district is in the second full year of its equity audit. The district formed the Equity and Inclusion Working Group back in 2019, didn't get fully underway until later on, but I am a proud member of that working group. I am the school committee liaison for them. We have done a lot of work, but there's still much to do. We have a coach that we work with who will remind me urgent people with no skills do harm. And it's important for her to tell me that. As a Black woman, she tells me that often because I worry about the safety and well-being of our students. I participated in several courageous conversations around race, LGBTQIA, religion, etc., and heard heartbreaking stories. And I always go back to my fundamental that my passion is for issues relating to human dignity. I think we have to have a diverse and qualified staff. Students should see themselves reflected in the teaching staff. We have to continue to implement our restorative justice practices. Restorative justice practices are an alternate way of disciplining. Restorative justice practice helps the student to own that they did something wrong, to hurt somebody else, and it involves the community in helping both the victim and the offender. And this is important. Restorative justice acknowledges that those who do wrong need healing too. And after all, these are just kids and they're learning about the world around them. I think we need to build support around community partnerships so that families get supported as well. And finally, we are always learning about biases that we have. It's a lifelong process. We all have an implicit bias. The fact that we need to learn about what our biases are and how they're implemented, how they're affecting people. I think it's imperative that we continually learn by educating ourselves on differences among people and cultures, and that includes professional development for our teaching staff. So thank you.
Thank you, Ness. Thank you, folks. We're halfway through. Great job. Thank you to all the candidates again for being here. The next couple questions will also be from members of the community. The order for this one, Matt C., we'll start with you. Here's the question, and is from a member of the Hingham community, as I mentioned. Please define equity and what you view as opportunities for improvement within the HPA, the Hingham Public Schools, to address that. How would you ensure that our special education students are included in the DEI work that has already begun in our district?
Thank you, Andrew. So yeah, to me, equity as it pertains to the school setting is ensuring we're giving all of our students what they need in order to thrive, develop academically and socially in that school setting. I've talked a little bit in the previous question about some of the things that I think would be important there. I think there's some other things that we should look at. There's been a fair amount of discussion recently and in the past around vocational schools. And I think we need to take a hard look at that and understand how we can make sure either we're offering more of that within Hingham, or making that opportunity within other towns available to Hingham students. I think that's important. I think we need to continue to look at how do we meet students where they are. So whether that's identifying ways to get other students into advanced placement classes, identifying more advanced placement classes that we can include, having a stronger focus on the arts, and of course, having a much stronger special ed program. I think those are all things that can be improved to address that. I think DEI is a huge tent, and that's really important. And, so I think the way you learn is absolutely a part of that. And so I think it's important as we're pursuing excellence in diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as we are in special education, that we are marrying those two where appropriate, and we're not pursuing those in separate paths. So I think it's really important that we have the goals associated with both of those, but then get after them in an effective way where we're not being inefficient with what ultimately is a limited set of resources. The final thing I'd say is, I think in particular with special education, we need to focus on ensuring there's not a stigma associated with SPED, especially as the students get older. I think that we can do that through better collaboration and communication with gen ed and special education teachers. I think we can invest more in paras to help facilitate that. I think all of that will help lessen, I guess, that stigma and allow for special education students to thrive throughout their 13 years of school. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Matt L., I'll repeat the question for you. Please define equity and what you view as opportunities for improvement within the Hingham Public Schools to address that. How would you ensure that our special education students are included in the DEI work that has already begun in our district? And this one's for Matt L. And when ready, we'll bring him up on the screen.
All right. Hi.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Like, I mean, to me, I define equity as getting everyone to the same level playing field, while recognizing that not everyone is coming from the same place, or has had the same advantages or disadvantages from a societal perspective. And looking for ways to improve that and how we can deal with equity. It comes down to a lot of what I talked about in my opening here, and that is having hard conversations. We've got to understand that when folks disagree with us, it doesn't make them bad.
We'll roll with it, Matt L. Keep going. No problem.
Sorry.
I think we're just there's a little admin note there, but keep going. Sorry, if you'd like to start over, please go ahead.
No, all right. No, that's fine. I'll continue to go. But look, when we're talking about ways for improvement, it comes back down to conversation. It comes back down to talking and recognizing that everybody has a perspective. And as long as we have a loving, safe, and welcoming environment to share our disagreement, bringing equity into the conversation shouldn't be that difficult. But when we look at special education and equity, I think the biggest thing that jumps off the plate to me is that right now, I don't think parents feel that they're in an equitable arrangement with administration. And I don't think that's because the administration or staff or teachers don't want to do everything they can to provide the best they can for students. It's that people are overwhelmed. And people sometimes, when you get a part of a process it's easier to just process the process than process the individual. And I think we're seeing this. I've heard it from a number of people, a number of parents throughout the community that, they've gone in with notes from children's and other things, and the administration sort of fluffs them off. That's not being equitable to the students in our district. So I think as we continue to work our way through that, let me take one little brief step back. I want to applaud the school committee as it's currently constituted for recognizing that we had a ways to go with equity and DEI. But there's still a lot more work to be done. And I think that has to happen collaboratively. And that's one of the areas where I think we can all make a change pretty quickly by fostering leadership through the administration on these issues. Thank you.
Great. Thank Matt. And thanks for being resilient through our little tech glitches there. I appreciate it. I'll invite Ness up next. And Ness, the question is, please define equity and what you view as opportunities for improvement within the Hingham Public Schools to address that. How would you ensure that our special education students are included in the DEI work that has already begun in our district?
Yep, thank you. Equity asks us to acknowledge that everyone has different needs, experiences, and opportunities. Equity in education requires putting systems in place to ensure that every student has an equal chance for success. It requires challenges or barriers faced by the individual that we need to figure out how to get past those barriers. And I want to be clear, equity is not a zero-sum game. Just because we need to work a little harder or provide supports for one student or group of students does not take away from somebody else. We want to provide every single student the opportunity to excel. I'm proud of the work that we did in the Equity and Inclusion Working Group to define what equity means to Hingham Public Schools. If you haven't had the chance, I encourage you to go to the Hingham Public Schools website and look at the work summarized there. Parents in Hingham learned firsthand what equity of opportunity meant when other towns were able to provide more in-person learning at the beginning and middle of the pandemic. And that's what lack of equity means to students of color, special ed, ability versus disability. So why do we focus on students of color, special ed, and students who have lower socioeconomic status than others in Hingham? It's because we know that from our data that they are not able to access the curriculum or be placed in the same advanced courses as their peers, and that's not okay. We know that a Black boy in Hingham is 4 times as likely to be identified as someone with a learning disability. We know that students with special ed education needs are not thriving on MCAS scores like their peers. So when people talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, there tends to be a blind spot for special education. But let me assure you, the work includes special ed. We held courageous conversations and a special ed forum. There's a special ed subcommittee and CPAC. But that doesn't mean that we're done. We still have to continue to shine a light on these issues and continue to include them in the conversation.
Thank you, Ness. Allie, you'll be the last one to answer this question from the Hingham community. Please define equity and what you view as opportunities for improvement within the HPS to address that. How would you ensure that our special education students are included in the DEI work that has already begun in our district?
Thank you. Equity and equality are often used interchangeably, but there's a difference. While equality is frequently used to mean treating everyone the same, equity includes the recognition that we don't all start from the same place, and we have to acknowledge and address those imbalances. Equity is ongoing, and we've started to do some of this work in our district, and now we just have to keep moving it ahead. I think when we look at it this way, it's a lot more straightforward to see how members of our special education community face barriers that many of us don't. I believe our DEI initiatives across the board need really trackable metrics and clear accountability. For example, we can continue to review the course enrollment data at the high school. This data, if you look at it, paints a picture of the barriers faced by a lot of our students. Ness mentioned some of it, but we have a disproportionate enrollment in our advanced classes for many of our disadvantaged communities. And we need to continue to look at that and understand why that data is coming across that way. A lot of parents I've spoke to have told me about how their students are shut out of certain classes, notably foreign language and music, due to the way we structure and deliver our special education services. So perhaps it's time to rethink our block schedule that we use at the high school so that our arts electives are more meaningfully available to all the students, and that our special education pullout services aren't so disruptive to that group of students. So if you think about music, it's an area where so many kids excel that may not excel in traditional academic areas, but we're taking that opportunity away from them. And those are the kids who would benefit the most. Music has been shown to have significant benefits for social emotional learning and sensory processing. So we need to really think hard about that. And then just one final thought, and Ness mentioned it as well, but as a community, we have to stop thinking about it being us versus them. Just because one group gets an opportunity, it doesn't mean it's being taken away from another. It's not a limited pie. So we don't give up something when one person gets from someone else, when one person gets a piece. It's actually the opposite. And the more we raise up the opportunity for all of us, the more there is to go around. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Allie. And you can stay on the screen. We're going to start with you for the next question. This question is also based on a question from a member of the Hingham community, and I'll provide the intro and then ask the question. Hingham is becoming increasingly unaffordable, particularly to those on a fixed income. The town may need to consider an operating override next fiscal year, which, taken with possible debt exclusions for a new school and public safety building, could significantly increase tax bills over a short 3-year period. So here's the question for all the candidates. What are your thoughts about the need for an operating override, and what role, if any, do you feel school committee members have in mitigating the potential impact of tax increases on those least able to afford them? Allie, you're on mute. We're very polite.
Now you can hear me. That was very polite.
Go ahead.
My family's lived in Hingham since I was 5, and having been a resident here and seen the changes in our town, I'm also concerned about the rising cost of living in Hingham. And there's no easy answers. And I think this issue of affordability is on everyone's minds, especially our town leaders. But there is a program, and I encourage people to become familiar with it, which is for real estate tax exemption programs. And it's a resource that I don't think is currently reaching as many homes as it could, but it's a really important program we do have in place. In regards to the override, I'll begin by saying there's still a lot of due diligence required. I think we need a thorough review of our district's finances and the distributions of resources. And, if I become a member of the school committee, I think that's one of the first things on the agenda. I have an undergraduate degree from the University of Pennsylvania and an MBA from the University of Chicago. And in my business, I've helped my clients with operations and finances for over 20 years. And this experience is really important because we'll also be hiring and onboarding a new business director. But that aside, we can't currently sustain our current school budget. And as a town, we need to continue to explore ways to increase our revenues and be efficient across the town with our spending. We need to stop thinking about the schools as always being the one taking the money, but be creative about ways that we can bring in additional revenues for our schools through camps, renting the facilities, or options for programs to bring in out-of-district students to our own district. An override will take the full support of our town. And if this is to pass, families of students that have impacted by our lean budgets for years will want and actually, are owed and the information on what this actually means to them. What's included in that operating budget that would improve their experience, specifically for special needs and minority students. I fully support an override, but I want to ensure it's done responsibly. Thank you.
Thank you, Allie. I'll welcome Ness onto the screen next. And while we're playing with the tech, if you're interested in abatements and exemptions, don't forget the Board of Assessors forum is next. So Ness, the question for you is, what are your thoughts about the need for an operating override? And what role, if any, do you feel school committee members have in mitigating the potential impact of tax increases on those least able to afford them?
Sure. So as a school committee member, I have an obligation to make decisions and recommendations that are in the best interest of students in our district. And to me, that means ensuring that the basic needs of all our students are being met and exceeded. We need to analyze the future needs of our students and adequately staff our district so that we can meet these needs. However, as a Hingham resident and a member of the community, I also want to ensure that we respect the needs of the entire town and our taxpayers. It's something I believe we need to collectively work on as a town. The advisory committee had stated since 2018 that the town would benefit from a long-term financial management plan. In 2020, they stated a study needed to be considered to see what new revenue sources we could bring in, and that would include a possible operational override. And if you were to ask any department head, they would tell you that they need more funding to meet the basic needs of their department. Just like the shortage that we're facing in the school department, other departments are also facing shortages. For instance, the fire and the police department. After the 2021 town meeting, the town administrator established a 6-member sustainable budget task force to develop options to facilitate a sustainable 5-year financial forecast. Members of that task force included our select board member, assistant town administrator, a former advisory committee member, members from the school department, and I was honored to be a member of that task force as the school committee liaison. And the charge was to come up with what the financial overcast would be using realistic assumptions for revenues and expenditure growth that would allow the town to provide services to meet residents' expectations. Collectively as a town, we have some hard decisions to make, but we know that from our master plan process, excellent schools was one of the recommendations that was coming out of that. So we have to just kind of figure out how to grow our revenues, or we might need an override. So thank you.
Thank you, Ness. Matt L., you're up next. The question again is, what are your thoughts about the need for an operating override? And what role, if any, do you feel school committee members have in mitigating the potential impact of tax increases on those least able to afford them?
Well, thank you for the question. I mean, if we want to be honest about where we are in the situation today, on the go forward, we have a $5 million budget deficit to level fund where we stand today, right? So and I applaud everyone involved with it this year, coming up with different and creative ways to use money so that both federal and one-time money and other monies, so that we can continue to have an operating budget presented this weekend at town meeting. But we're going to need an override to just level fund where we are today. So look, I think the schools today, we get around 67% of the budget of that pie. I think that's probably the right number, but I do think the pie needs to be bigger, right? I support an override that's tactically done and driven towards best outcomes for our schools in our town. And I think, when I look at the role of the school committee, when it comes to these things, it's not just people with kids in school that will have an opportunity to vote for us. It's the entire community. So I think the job of the school committee is to represent the needs of the schools based on the entire community. And this is one of those ones for me where, look, we need to be very transparent in our budgeting. I fully supported and still support the fine arts director, but I think we should have a conversation and a dialogue around things like what it costs for a fine arts director, what we're doing there, what we can't do in other areas because we're doing that. I think the public needs to see that, and they need to understand that we are making responsible decisions and responsible choices with the public's money that the school committee is entrusted with. So I think the other parts of the question in terms of the potential impact and how we can look, I was one of those kids who grew up impacted. I thought Kool-Aid was a color, not a flavor, because we only put the 10-cent packs in it. My mom wouldn't have had the time to go down to try to seek or get our landlord to try to seek abatements or different programs. So we have to stop. Sorry. I didn't see that. It was all black for a while there.
It's okay, Matt. You could finish up your thought.
Well, I think we just have to make responsible decisions with everybody's interest in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Last, Matt C. You'll be the final person to answer this question from a member of the Hingham, based on a question from a member of the Hingham community. What are your thoughts about the need for an operating override? And what role, if any, do you feel school committee members have in mitigating the potential impact of tax increases on those least able to afford them?
Yeah, so in the short term, I think it's pretty hard to see how we're not going to have that, how we don't have the need for an override. To me, the two bigger questions than that are, how big is the override? So what is the actual size of that override? And how do we ensure we aren't having to have an override every 2 years? So I think those are the important questions. I really see very little chance to certainly not go to a vote and not have the town support and override. In terms of what we can do for lower income, I do think it's less the school committee responsibility directly. I think we need to make sure that as a town, we're making very clear what is available to lower income households or individuals so that they can take advantage of things that would allow them to not have to increase their taxes. But what can the school committee do? I think what we can do is focus on the budget and make it a lot more transparent about the trade-offs in terms of, I'll echo a little bit what Matt LeBren said. I wish I'd gone before him, but that I think when we're debating what we need to add, we need to also be having the discussion about what is on the table that we can replace that with. And the answer may be nothing. That very well may be the answer, but I think we need to have a much more open dialogue around what are the 2 or 3 options that we're considering, and then build the case for either why we need all that to provide the services, or maybe there is something that for whatever reason it was extremely necessary 5-10 years ago, but it isn't as necessary now, and it doesn't meet the priority list of in the context of not having to have an override every couple of years. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Matt. We're on to our last question, folks, and I'll invite Neff to start with this one. It's about measurement and accountability. How do you believe we should be evaluating and measuring the strengths and weaknesses of our special education programs? And what do you believe is the role of the school committee in holding special education administrators accountable?
Thanks for that question. So a school committee has oversight and responsibility for a school system. They set the direction for the school system and establish a way to determine if the goals and policies are being met. The superintendent serves as the school committee's CEO and educational advisor. The day-to-day operations of a school system is the responsibility of the superintendent, together with the school principals and other administrative staff members. The superintendent is responsible for holding special ed administrators accountable. That said, part of the school committee role is to hire and evaluate the superintendent. And if a department is not meeting the needs of the students, a school committee member should hold the superintendent accountable. What we've done in the past is we've put in a specific special education goal in the superintendent's goals for the year. The superintendent then gets evaluated at the end of that school cycle. I think we've come a long way in the special education department, but I think we all recognize that there's still some work to do. We know that there's a disparity in the MCAS results for special ed, for instance. It's only one measure, but it's data that we can analyze. So I think about how we can move forward. I am really excited about the new superintendent coming in. She talks a lot about putting systems and structures in place, and that includes mentoring and evaluating the staff. I know that there were some who were concerned about hiring an assistant superintendent over someone who has had experience as a superintendent in the district. For me, one of the areas that set Dr. Adams apart from the other candidates was what we learned about during our reference checks. There were a lot of consistent feedback about her ability to mentor teachers and staff and build strong relationships. And I think it's vital to building a strong school district that works for all of our students. So thank you.
Thank you, Ness. Allie, you're up next. How do you believe we should be evaluating and measuring the strengths and weaknesses of our special education programs? And what do you believe is the role of the school committee in holding special education administrators accountable?
Thank you. And thank you, Ness, because she gave a great explanation, so I won't repeat it, and I can talk about other things now with my time. So I appreciate that I'm second. So thanks. But I think we need to pull back the lens a little bit and make sure we have some macro data to support and measure our efforts within our schools. And I think we should look to our benchmark towns and other towns around us. What programming are they offering that we don't have in Hingham? We hear a lot about executive functioning, academic support, social skills supports, and we've talked about some of that and some of the other questions, but we need to be looking at all of that within our district and seeing what else is happening elsewhere that we can maybe learn from and bring into our own schools. equally important is understanding how those towns are actually delivering those services. As I mentioned earlier, scheduling has a big impact on our students, and also staffing levels and division of labor within our district. And then finally, I think once we have all that, we can really determine the metrics we'll use to measure what our programs are accomplishing. And one of the measurements I was looking at when I was researching for this question was during 2019 and 2020 school year, 7.4% of special education high school students took a music class, compared to 16.1% of the full student body. And if you break that down by head count, according to that, there was 10 special education students in the high school total, but 0 juniors or seniors. So just take a second to think about that. We had no juniors or seniors who were part of our special education program in our music program, none. So I think we really need to think about these type of things and these metrics as we move ahead to determine the best course forward. I think we need strong and transparent relationships with our families and with the school. We really need to listen more and collaborate together. And I believe that the school committee sets the tone for all of that on those discussions. So we need to take a hard look and see what makes sense for our district right now as we move to the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Allie. Matt C, good news. You get to go before Matt L for this one. I'll repeat the question. How do you believe we should be evaluating and measuring the strengths and weaknesses of our special education programs? And what do you believe is the role of the school committee in holding special education administrators accountable?
Yeah, so I mean, I think we need data and metrics. Data and metrics aren't going to give you the answer, but it's an input into a discussion. And right now, I haven't seen it in any meaningful way, and I'm not sure why that is. I don't know if we don't have the data, or it's an unwillingness to share the data. But right now, it's not even. It doesn't seem to be available. I think the surveys. There's another survey that went out that didn't reach all of the special education families. That's another way to gather input. But we need to start gathering that. What it shouldn't be is, we're going to set in place a process to identify what data and metrics are going to be, and then a year from now we'll look at it for the first time. And we should be having this discussion immediately. In terms of accountability, I mean, I agree that the sort of formal role of the school committee is to, or not formal, the law is to set policy, to hire and fire a superintendent, to manage the budget. But there's ways to hold leaders accountable within that. You can set a policy where we're going to have a review with the special education leader, and do that quarterly, and have a discussion about, to ask questions. We do have a special education subcommittee. I would encourage us to have more dialogue where the special education subcommittee comes to the broader school committee and brings, what they're hearing, what concerns do they have, what's going well, what's not going well. I haven't seen enough of that. I'd like to see more of that. And there's things that I think we should be asking, like, why is it so hard to include the word dyslexia in an IEP? That should not be a difficult thing for Hingham to agree to. But I've talked to, honestly, like 50 parents where that's the same thing. That's not acceptable. And we should be able to ask the questions around that. We need to be able to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Matt L, final candidate answering this question on measurement and accountability. How do you believe we should be evaluating and measuring the strengths and weaknesses of our special education programs? And what do you believe is the role of the school committee in holding special education administrators accountable?
So the first step you need to take to correct the problem is to admit that there's a problem. And I think that's the first thing we need to do here. Look, in our community, we're a great town with great schools, but we have some chinks in our armor. U.S. News and World Report came out with a study yesterday. We've dropped 13 points in our state ranking. At the same time, in that same period of time, Cohasset's gone up 2. We have a C- on it. Look, we've got to admit that we're a great town with a great community full of wonderful educators who care about kids, and particularly those with special needs. But there's a problem somewhere here. And we need to do, the first thing we need to do is own that, and then force the tough conversations, much like the Unity Council has done in town and CPAC has done to help move us to this point. We need to force these hard conversations. And ultimately, the school committee, it's 7 people. This is not an executive opportunity where somebody can come in and drop down and say the buck stops here. But the reality is the buck does stop here. It stops with the 7 people that will be on that school committee, holding the superintendent and his or her on the go forward staff accountable to this particular community and making sure that we are delivering the services to our kids that need them. Look, one way that I would go out, I think it's great. We need metrics, we need data. We had 400 kids leave our school above and beyond what normally leave. I think we should go to those people and say, why did you leave? What could we have done better, or what would bring you back to our schools? I think those are the types of things that we need to do, which is a recognition of, hey, we're great, but we can be better, and help us get there. And I think that's, for me, that's job one. And I think if 3 years from now, there are candidates in front of you having the same conversation, the same question, then that means the 7 folks that will have served in the next 3 years have not done right by our students. Thank you. I appreciate the question.
Thank you, Matt. You can stay on the screen here. We've made it through the Q&A part, and we're to closing statements. As a reminder for folks, we will proceed in reverse ballot order for the closing statements, and each of you will have 90 seconds. Matt L., whenever you're ready, please begin.
Well, thanks for having me here at this forum. I appreciate it. But it's very humbling running for office. We're all either friends or friendly with each other, the 4 of us. At least that's how I view it. And we're all good people who all have what we think are the best interests of our kids and our community at heart. So none of this is easy to get up here and look, I'm not an education expert. I'm a dad. I'm a lawyer. I'm a small business owner. I'm a husband. I'm a coach. I'm a one-time thespian, but I'm not an expert on this. These are my opinions, just like they're the opinions of everybody else here. So it's been an honor to be able to share my opinions and thoughts with you. And I want to urge everyone, you have 3 votes. I urge you to use all 3 because all 4 of us are good, decent people who I think really want what's best for every kid and every family in our community. So again, thanks for the opportunity to bring my thoughts to bear, and I wish everyone luck.
Thank you, Matt. Matt C., we'll go to you next. Final statement when you're ready.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you to everyone who participated, my fellow candidates certainly, and everyone who is watching this. As I mentioned at the start, I'm the husband of a former SPED educator, parent of a SPED student. I've talked to a lot of parents that have special education students, as well as parents that are passionate about better inclusion and better unity in the schools. And there is work to be done. And I think we've all highlighted a lot of those areas today. I really think the biggest area is the relationship between leadership and the community they serve. It is just too difficult, and we're not all on the same page, and that needs to change. It really does. And I really feel that everyone wants the best thing, but it's a little bit of a mindset shift. And we need to get out of the situation where parents feel like they need to hire an advocate or hire a lawyer or hire their own testing in order to get the services for their child, or take their kids out of school because they don't feel comfortable with, the environment that they're in. I'll also just say, I recognize these are both subjects that are difficult. And I think
Matt, you're on mute if you'd like to unmute. Sorry.
Sorry, I don't know when I went on mute. Somewhere around passionate, but I want to take the time to say these are charged, important topics that we all care a lot about. But I haven't lost sight of how incredible this town is, how incredible the teachers are, how much they care about the kids and delivering the best services. And so I hope we can improve it. I think we can improve it, but I don't want to lose sight of the fact that we have some really great people helping out in the school system. So thank you so much for your time, and look forward to speaking to anybody after the fact. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Allie, I'd welcome your closing statement whenever you're ready.
There I am. Okay. As I've gone through the campaign process, I've spoken with families and students, and it's become clear that the support needed for our special education populations and other groups just isn't being met. Personally, I've had friends who have left the system because they didn't feel they had the support, and it's really upsetting to listen to parents talk about why they pulled their kids from Hingham after they chose to live here and move here and plan to send their kids to our schools. I'm really passionate about making sure that all the students in our district are given a chance to shine, to be celebrated for who they are and feel like they belong in our community. I'm also focused on improving the communications within our schools between the parents, the students, and the administration. And I think it's imperative that we hold our schools and our elected officials accountable to meeting the needs of all of these students. These groups have been made to feel that they are overlooked for way too long. We've had lean budgeting for many years now, and we're feeling the brunt of it. So I think we need to finally commit to moving Hingham forward together. We have a lot of work to do, but I'm excited about being able to do it and make it a community that's more inclusive for all, and make all feel that they belong and are part of it. So thank you so much for having us here tonight. This was a lot of fun. Thank you to all the other candidates and for everyone who found the time to watch us tonight.
Thank you, Allie. And Ness, you'll be the final candidate to offer a closing statement when you're ready.
Yep. Okay, thanks. So back to where we are as far as equity goes, we believe that all members of our community, as students, parents, guardians, faculty, and staff, they deserve the right to be fully seen, authenticated, and affirmed. The sense of belonging is a basic human need, which must be met in order for any member to reach their full potential. And we recognize that each member of our community has different needs and experiences and opportunities. And we need to gain understanding and compassion and empathy for one another. We know that our strength as a community comes from the diversity of experiences and perspectives brought to us by everyone in our town. And the only way that we can all benefit from this strength is to celebrate those differences and teach our students and children why we celebrate them. There may be people in this world who are uncomfortable with what I shared about my childhood, but it's not really about them, and it's not about me. It's about our students, and it's about their right to be seen, heard, respected, and valued. It's about human dignity, and I am truly passionate about the issues around human dignity. If anyone wants to hear any more from me, I know that the forum was quick answers, but I always welcome a coffee and reaching out. I put my cell phone on my email address, so I will give it here. It's 617-413-5662. I love meeting with people one-on-one, so just reach out. And I thank the Hingham Unity and Hingham CPAC for pulling this together. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to everybody tonight. Thanks.
Thank you, Ness. And a big thank you to all of the candidates for your willingness to participate in the forum this evening. We are very grateful for your participation, and we wish everyone all of the best of luck in the election. Thank you to our audiences for tuning in. I have a lot more to say, but we're behind schedule in terms of sort of wrapping up. So I will very quickly just say that the election is Saturday, May 14th. The deadline to register to vote is Wednesday, May 4th. And the town clerk's office will be open until 8 p.m. that day. So please do not forget to register if you have not done so yet. We will, if we are ready, move very quickly into our next forum, which is the Board of Assessors. And I understand that there's not a lot of transition here. So let me see if the candidates are here. We have two candidates, Al and Randy. Are both of the candidates here?
I am here, Andy.
Great. Hey, let me, so that we don't jump right in, let me just review the rules really fast. Thank you so much for being here. I'm just going to do a quick intro and we'll jump right into it because you all have been very patient. I know we're running a little behind schedule. I will ask each of you to briefly introduce yourself in ballot order. We will allow you to make a 2-minute opening statement. We then have 3 questions this evening. The questions have been provided in advance. We'll give each of you 1 minute and 45 seconds to answer that question. And then we'll close with a 90-second closing statement from each of you. It will go fast. I appreciate y'all being here. For the opening statements, we will go in ballot order. And that means that Al will start with you. If you have a 2-minute opening statement, whenever you're ready, please begin.
I'm ready, Andy. Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it. I am not a native of Hingham, but I came here a long time ago, and I suspect at the time there were 5,000 residents and probably a lot more Marines in the two bases we had. I have served on the Affordable Housing Committee. I've been an assessor. Excuse me. I've been on the Housing Committee and the Board of Assessors for 4 years, raised 5 children here, and spent my career in finance. After I retired from finance, banking, and mortgage-backed securities, I went into real estate here locally for a while. Usually, you make a statement as to whether you love the town or not, and I do, but this town has grown from the small start that I saw to what is now a $140 million business enterprise, actually, on which the revenues that provide the ability to operate come from the tax base, 90% of which is residential. It's very, very important that we get this straight because we are on the edge of a lot of change in terms of capital needs.
Wonderful. Thank you, Al, for your opening statement. And just to remind the candidates, we will have a little placard that reminds you how much time you have left. So please try and finish up if you see the little 30-second. Randy, thank you for being here. I'll invite you when you're ready to begin with your opening statement. You'll have 2 minutes.
Great. Thanks, Andy. So I have been a Hingham resident for 9 years. My wife, Laura, is the owner of the Hingham Anchor. We have 3 young daughters, age 11, 9, and 4. I've been a member of the Affordable Housing Trust for the past year. And basically, my free time is largely driven by my kids' activities. I'm a perpetual youth sports coach for all my daughters. And, I try to get involved as much as I can in all of those activities. I didn't grow up in Hingham, but my parents live in Hingham and have for the past 25 years. My sister's family lives in Hingham. So we've got a lot of connections to this town. I'm a graduate of Boston College, both undergraduate and MBA. I spent 5 years at a real estate law firm in Washington, D.C., handling property tax appeals for property owners and managers of commercial properties in D.C., Maryland, and Virginia. So I have that background. And I've spent the past 9 years working in the private lending industry, managing valuations of residential properties. The past 3 years of which I've been running my own private lending business, focusing on valuation and analysis of residential properties in Massachusetts. So looking forward to the opportunity to hopefully serve on the board moving forward here. And that's a little bit about my background.
Great. Thanks, Randy. And thanks to both the candidates for the opening statements. As a reminder, we'll have 3 questions. And since there's only 2 of you, we'll just ping pong back and forth between the 2 of you. So we'll start with Randy and then Al, and then we'll switch the order, et cetera, until we get through all the questions. As a reminder for the audience as well, we have sent all these questions in advance to the candidates. And so I will start with the first one, and Randy, this one will be for you with a quick introduction. As discussed in our last candidate forum for Board of Assessors about a year ago, one of the roles of the Board of Assessors is to rule on abatement requests made by homeowners. And for the benefit of the audience, an abatement is a reduction in the tax assessed on someone's property for the fiscal year. Abatement decisions are made in executive session, and deliberations are not public. So Randy, the question for you is, can you discuss a specific change you would make to the abatement process, if any?
So the Department of Assessors and the Board of Assessors have really done an excellent job in terms of posting, a comprehensive summary of information on how to apply for abatements, as well as kind of what to expect throughout the process. And without having really worked through the process personally or having served on the board previously, it's kind of difficult to provide any direct suggestions or potential changes. But I think one thing that would be beneficial for the residents of our town would be to really just post deadlines and a little bit of information on sort of some publicly available information or available resources. Obviously, the website of the assessors is available, but it's not something that people check on regularly. So it's got to be something that's a little bit more, more available and more readily viewed. And this is not a plug for my wife's business, but the Hingham Anchor is a potential resource for some of these things. But I think since many tax payments are processed by banks holding mortgages on the properties, many residents are unaware of assessment changes or that abatement might be warranted. And since I've started working and doing civic duties with the Affordable Housing Trust, I've mentioned to my wife several times that there's so many great committees and individuals throughout our town that are doing great work that are not really recognized or understood by a lot of our residents. And I think that type of resource is the type of place where posting information, as bills are being issued or assessment bills or new assessments are being issued, bills are being issued, deadlines for abatements. I think that type of resource is something that would be very helpful for just general residents who really aren't familiar with the process or what options are available for them.
Great. Thank you, Randy, for your answer. Al, I'll turn it over to you now. You are an incumbent candidate, so you are familiar with this process. What are the decision-making criteria the board uses when considering abatements?
Well, to start with, Andy, Hingham is a wealthy town, but not every taxpayer is wealthy. And abatements are not really easily given. They are earned, and they're earned on the basis of a number of factors which we confidentially take into assessment. And when we consider an abatement, size of the property, condition of the property, age of the homeowner, financial resources, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I would not be very anxious to change the abatement process because it's difficult to get one. And if you get one, you earned it. And the key factor in assessing is to make sure the properties in this town are evaluated accurately. And I would leave the abatement process in place because we have a lot of elderly people who bought homes a long time ago that struggle to pay their taxes. And when it's time for them to get a hand, I want to give it to them.
Great. Thank you, Al. Al, we'll stick with you for the next question. This question is from a member of the Hingham community. And here it is. Means testing is a term that broadly references payments based on resources, typically in reference to income. Is there a role for means testing at the local level for Hingham's property tax levy?
Not yet, but we're considering it. And it's tied to hardship. Means testing would be applied in the event someone had assets that exceeded a level which we haven't established at this point, and which would make the request for a decline in taxes unfeasible if the individual taxpayer or taxpayers had assets that could easily cover the process.
Thank you, Al. Randy, I'll invite you on to answer the same question, and I'll repeat it for the benefit of the audience and for you. Means testing is a term that broadly references payments based on resources, typically in reference to income. Is there a role for means testing at the local level for Hingham's property tax levy?
I agree with Al. I mean, I think I know there's nothing in place currently aside from the program that is in place for seniors. That is a statewide program that there's multiple levels and criteria that's tied to it. But for non-senior homeowners in our town, there is no means testing in place. And a lot of it's not just income, but it's assets, because you can't just look at one or the other. You can't just look at income because some folks just are in a position where they're not earning income, but they may have several assets that would allow them to make payments on their property taxes. So you have to look at the global picture, and I agree with Al entirely that if we do start to gravitate or evolve towards that. And, we do need to look at the global picture and not just simply income as it relates to means valuation.
Great. Thank you, Randy. And you can stay on for this next one. There'll be a little bit of an introduction. This is our final question. And let me give you a brief context for you as well as for the audience. Large residential developments in town, like the Avalon and the Shipyard, are assessed as residential entities, not commercial ones, and are therefore subjected to the same assessment process as homeowners, just like any homeowner in all of Hingham. If these residential complexes disagree with the town's tax assessment, they may challenge it formally with a large legal team and significantly reduce the amount of tax the town believes is due. So Randy, the question for you with that intro is, do you believe the town needs to change how it does business with large residential complexes? And how would your approach differ from what's currently done?
I guess in my experience, having handled commercial property tax appeals for several years, having dealt with literally thousands of appeal process or appeals on properties, it would seem appropriate that a large residential apartment complex should be treated as a commercial property. But the most important aspect in making sure that the board has the authority to employ varying valuation methods depending on the property type and the rate at which the residential properties are taxed is not below that of commercial properties. So you want to make sure that commercial and residential are being taxed, equally. If a large, what truly is a commercial property, if a large commercial property is being treated as a residential property, you still want to make sure it's being taxed at an appropriate rate. Right now, as we know, it is taxed. The commercial and residential rates are 1-to-1. So that's something that we want to obviously continue to monitor. But in this case, a residential apartment complex should be valued using the income capitalization approach. This is basically a method that reviews the operating statements of a property to determine the net operating income. Then a market rate capitalization rate is applied to the NOI to determine the market value. Having represented property owners in the appeal process previously in prior jobs, there really should not be a fear of working with large legal teams representing these owners. We're all dealing with data and facts, so it's not something that should be feared in terms of whether we're dealing with an individual property owner or a large corporation that happens to own some of these apartment complexes. But ultimately, though, if an abatement is warranted, the purpose of the board is to determine the fair market value without consideration of the financial impact to the town in the form of the reduced property taxes. So that's the purpose of this board.
Great. Thank you, Randy. Al, I'll invite you on. I won't repeat the intro. This question is about large residential complexes in town. But I'm curious for you, what has been your experience working with these large residential developments? And do you believe they are underpaying their share of property taxes?
No, I don't. Especially the new ones. We have a lot of new apartment complexes in the north end of town. And frankly, over a period of time, I think we're going to see large apartment complexes in South Hingham. There's a lot of undeveloped land up there. It is corporate policy to request abatements on large properties like this. And we do get hit every year by companies asking for abatement. The closest we've come to having a problem of this nature where we are looking at a lot of legal costs to defend a value was with Linden Ponds. Now, Linden Ponds is our largest taxpayer, and they asked for a very large drop in their assessed value. And what happens is if you deny it, it eventually winds up on a court docket. And the longer you wait to get to court on the issue, you wind up with a small town fighting a big corporate owner. And we gave away on the issue Linden Ponds requested.
Thank you, Al. We made it through our Q&A. We're going to go to closing statements now, and we will go in reverse ballot order. And that means, Randy, when you're ready, we invite you to make a closing statement for up to 90 seconds.
Thanks. About a year ago, my wife convinced me to enter my name into the town talent bank. And in this short time, I've recognized the importance and impact of town volunteers. Between my wife and I, we've built very strong ties to this community in a relatively short period of time. And these ties drive us to continue to expand our roles in the community. To this end, I believe my background will provide a positive infusion to the board during this critical evaluation year. Additionally, I'm a firm believer that leveling the playing field relative to property valuations throughout the town. We have to ensure that the baseline for applying fair market values to the best of our ability is achieved. No one enjoys paying more taxes, but it's well recognized the significance of the revenue generated by the town for the town by the property taxes. And these tax funds support so many great programs and resources that make this town as great as it is. But beyond the importance of setting the fair market value baseline, we need to do a better job of making sure our residents are aware of the exemptions that are available. And this will ultimately build greater diversity within our town and allow us to flourish even further.
Thank you, Randy. Al, I invite you when you're ready to make your closing statement. You'll have 90 seconds when you're ready.
I'd like to complete the one-year term I'm running for. I've enjoyed this job immensely. You have a very talented staff of assessors in the office. They're professionals. The requirement of the elected members of the board is not to do the actual work, but to make sure that the guidance of it is within parameters for the taxpayers of Hingham. And so we're sort of steering the ship. Right now, we're looking at some fairly major capital increases at a time when real estate levels have risen precipitously to maybe 40% over the past couple of years. And it's our job to make sure that all boats rise evenly on the same tide. I think your elected board has done a good job on that, as well as the job done by your professional employers.
Wonderful. Thank you, Al. Well, that went quickly, but I'm very grateful to both Randy and Al for their time, for being flexible this evening on the schedule. And I wanted to thank both of you very much for your willingness to participate in this forum. We wish both of you the best of luck in the election, and thank you to the audience members that are tuning in. Just a quick reminder, the election is Saturday, May 14th. The deadline to register to vote for this election is Wednesday, May 4th. And the town clerk's office will be open until 8 p.m. that day. Thank you for joining us, and we will now transition to our third race, which is the Board of Health. And let's give a second for the folks to join us. Looks like we have them both here. Great, wonderful. So let me just let you all settle in for 1 second and give a quick reminder again for the audience. Each candidate will have, we'll invite them to make an opening statement for up to 2 minutes. We then, similarly to Board of Assessors, have 3 questions for each of them. The questions have been sent in advance, and we will flip-flop between who starts and who ends. And then at the end, we will proceed in reverse ballot order for closing statements of up to 30 seconds. So we will start when you're ready. Kirk, if you'd like to make an opening statement, please unmute and begin whenever you're ready. Kirk, can you hear us okay?
Not very well. It cuts in and out frequently. So,
okay.
No.
Well, you
right now.
Okay, great. I'd invite you. You have 2 minutes to make an opening statement if you'd like to make an opening statement.
Of course. Well, the first thing I'd like to thank the community for having this forum, and it's unique that you have a perspective that we really don't typically get, and with the questions that are focused within the parameters of your community, I think it's wonderful. It's very unique. So that's the first thing I'd like to say. First of all, Kirk Schultz, I'm running for re-election to the Board of Health. I've been on for a number of terms. I live here in South Hingham, born here in Hingham. And the reason that I'm running for re-election is I believe the Board of Health has done a fabulous job here in town. Relative to some of the projects that have come in, the 40B developments. We can talk about that a bit later in one of your questions. But I was the person that identified and was able to put together the response for the board relative to the concerns that two of them we're going to have on our water supply. In addition to that, we have some questions about COVID. I'm looking forward to that and talk about what I did specifically and including what the board did relative to that particular health pandemic, which is a little bit different than the questions you had. So the Board of Health, the reason that we're here, and this is something I bring up because it's unclear that everyone knows, but the Board of Health is here to protect the citizens of the town through principally insult to the environment. So we think about the primary, drinking water, and that's been going on for 100 years. And then septic site. Drinking water is polluted. We do the 21E sites, which is the gas stations that leak, and also again for drinking water. So most of what the board does as day-to-day activity is protection through protecting the environment. Unlike the Conservation Commission that's protecting the wetlands and the environment for the sake of the environment, we're protecting it for the effect that it has on the population here in town. So I don't have a timer in front of me. I don't see one up there. But in addition to those environmental things, we do a number of things that are health screening, public health. And again, we'll be talking about a couple of those here tonight. So again, it's probably been about.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Kirk. Yeah, we will sort of intermittently flash when there's about 30 seconds left, and then at the end of the time. And as I've reminded the candidates from the previous discussions, just try and wrap up. We won't be too militant about it. Try and finish your thought. Rosemary, thanks for coming on. You have 2 minutes to make an opening statement whenever you're ready.
Great, thank you. And thank you everyone for this opportunity to speak to you all. I am Rosemary Byrne. I was also born and raised in Hingham, and I feel very lucky to be back here raising my family. I'm a nurse practitioner, and I'm running for a seat on the Board of Health. As Kirk touched on, the Board of Health's main purposes fall under health planning, health promotion, and code enforcement. So the majority of what the board does involves the health planning, which is septic inspections and well water system regulations. So the state of Massachusetts has Title V regulations that I feel like everyone knows that term from any real estate transaction. But that says that we have to inspect septic systems with some regularity. And then Hingham's Board of Health has gone and made an additional set of requirements that's even more appropriate to our town. And so that's so important as a role of the Board of Health because it really protects our health in terms of what pollutants are entering the groundwater. And so it's not very glamorous, but that's a really important job in terms of keeping us all safe on a really, really basic level. I know there's a learning curve involved here. I'm a nurse practitioner. I'm not a septic expert, but I'm used to learning and adapting all the time in the medical field. I'm used to working collaboratively with a team, having differences of opinion and being able to collaborate. So the health promotion category has to do with public health education. And that's somewhere I feel really passionate about because I think there's a huge room for growth in that area. Our town has received a grant to share an epidemiologist with Cohasset and Hull. So we'll have some real data of areas where our residents are at risk, and we'll be able to tailor some of that education in terms of that. So I would love to use social media, traditional media, things like Harbor Media to really promote health education in the town and make everyone more aware of what the Board of Health does. I'd be really excited to step into this role of service for a town that I love so much. And I humbly ask for everyone's support in the election.
Thank you, Rosemary. You can stay on screen. We're going to flip that back and forth between you and Kirk for 3 questions. As a reminder, all these questions have been sent in advance to the candidates, and we'll go through them now. The first one, perhaps not surprisingly, is about COVID. And the CDC has reported that across the nation, the COVID pandemic inequitably impacted many populations, including low-income, ethnic and minority populations, and persons with disabilities. So for Rosemary, the question for you is, do you have thoughts on Hingham's COVID response and how a future health crisis could be managed to ensure health equity for all residents?
So I was very impressed with the town's response to the COVID pandemic. It was a really unique, challenging time. And I think it's easy to sit here now and look back with 2020 vision of what could have, should have been done. And what the town did was create a command staff. So it had the town executive health officer, the town administrator, the police chief, among others. And they were meeting daily, 7 days a week for months, tracking case numbers. The public health nurse was in constant contact with the school nurses, doing contact tracing. And so a lot of what happens during a crisis like that is really guided and dictated by guidelines from the state and other organizations. So I think in the future that having that model in place to set up a command staff when something, hopefully we'll never need that again, but should it happen, I think is a really great way to handle it, to pull people from different backgrounds and different aspects of the town. And then I think getting the Board of Health involved earlier on, a lot of the burden was falling on the health department initially in the COVID pandemic. And so I think if there was to be any sort of change, it would be involving the Board of Health possibly sooner to help shoulder some of that burden. But overall, I've been impressed with the town's response and think that our cases stayed relatively low. And I guess the only other area that maybe could have a little improvement would be the spreading of information. So making the residents a little bit more aware of what was going on. But overall, I thought it was handled well.
Thank you, Rosemary. Kirk, over to you. The question is about health inequities. How did the inequities we talked about manifest in Hingham? And what, if anything, was done to mitigate them?
Andrew, I can't hear what you're saying. And the unfortunate part is, I didn't hear most of what Rosemary says, and she's a smart woman. I would have loved to have heard that. But, the technology is what it is. My guess is that you're asking.
Yeah, let me speak up for you because I want to make sure that you have the opportunity to hear the question and for the audience as well.
Okay.
So I'll start from the beginning, actually, just for the sake of completion. So the CDC has reported that across the nation, the COVID pandemic inequitably impacted many populations, including low-income, ethnic and minority populations, and persons with disabilities. And so the question for you is, how did those inequities manifest in Hingham? And what, if anything, was done to mitigate them?
Yeah. And so when you think about healthcare in general, the reason that you see the inequities among those populations is because those populations don't utilize health services, the clinical health services, as much as they should. They have a fear of going to the doctors. They feel as though it's difficult to get there. They have a problem with access in some of the populations. And so what Hingham did was to make available to every resident in the town services to help them if they wanted to talk about COVID, because if they had COVID, they were instructed to stay home. And so it was the education, it was the public health aspect of it is what we performed to the Board of Health. As Rosemary had mentioned, we gave authority to our executive health officer to act on the board's behalf. That way she could do it more nimbly and quickly, and then bring to us within, I think, 24 hours, the information that the task force had, and then we would vote to affirm or make our own recommendations. So we were able to get Susan to work with that particular group. And so we had a larger perspective on what to do. The Board of Health, what I did, because I'm running on my record. So when the pandemic hit, nobody went to work in this town. And so what I did is I went to all the grocery stores and I did COVID observations to see what they were doing, what they could do better, what the other stores were doing, because this was all brand spanking new. There was no outline on what to do. We were working off of the flu model, right? Contact of hands wiping down the grocery carts. And so I even have on my phone, I have all the inspections that I did for all the grocery stores because it was the only place that was open. And so it was learned a lot, but as far as relative to underprivileged populations, that's a larger perspective. And the Board of Health, we make the information available, but we couldn't drive out and knock on doors and go to people to educate them one-on-one if they weren't able to tune into us.
Great.
I think it's a
Thank
minute
you,
that you
Kurt.
gave me, and that's probably about there. Yeah.
Yeah. Just for the sake of both candidates, about 1 minute and 45 seconds. Kind of a strange
Is
number.
there a clock somewhere? I don't see
Yeah.
it.
If you look up at the screen, every once in a while you'll see a little sign that says stop. Amy will. Yeah, it'll be like that. So it's okay.
Sorry
Like
about
you
it.
said,
Yeah,
try
I
your
need
best.
to focus more on the clock. Thank you.
Yeah. Great. Thank you, Kirk. We'll actually invite you to stay on the screen. This next question is from a member of the Hingham community. And this resident asks, if elected, or I guess in your case, if re-elected, how would you use the authority of the Board of Health to positively impact the lives of low to moderate income residents in Hingham?
Great. Again, I'm running on my record. Let me tell you what I've done. I mentioned the 40Bs, right? And there were a couple of them that were going to potentially harm our water supply. But 40Bs, that housing component, we need more housing opportunities for our residents. So one of the things that I did was when we had a housing application up on Whiting Street for the 2 homes for the low income up by Derby Brook. The Board of Health position was, well, the neighbor next door has his own drinking well within 150 feet, which didn't comply with the board's regulation on the setback. Now, the board's position is, hey, we were going to oppose these 2 septic systems because of that setback. But, fortunately, I was able to, because I know Title V really well, I know that there are provisions within Title V that let you do an offset. And so when I recommended the zoning board, when that went before the zoning board prior to COVID, was we can do an offset in which we save nitrogen protection in one area and to another, allowing developed at the same time, providing that neighbor who has a legit with whole house well water, whole house water treatment system. And that would have been an elegant solution. We get everything. We're able to put those 2 homes in, which are up there. They got permitted. And also the neighbor, again, that's something that I put into a Board of Health that there is treatment to his well water. And, not something that health is embraced. Housing is really important for us to make it a 4 of it.
Thank you, Kirk. That's great. You're breaking up a little. I just want you to be aware of that. But I think that we got 95% of your response. So thank you for that. I'll invite Rosemary on for the same question, and I'll repeat it for your benefit. If elected, how would you use the authority of the Board of Health to positively impact the lives of low to moderate income residents in Hingham?
So as Kirk touched on, one of the main roles of the Board of Health is granting variances and working with the planning and zoning boards with 40B projects. And so that's a way that the town can increase access to more affordable housing in our town. I think it's a really important area that we need to navigate carefully because our drinking water is a really valuable resource. And so we can't risk public health in doing that. But with, like Kirk mentioned, with really careful consideration and in the right settings, in the right places in town, increasing that access is important. The other way is that the health department has brought on a social worker. So there's a full-time social worker in the town for the last 3 years. And this is not a clinical social work position in terms of there's not counseling being done, but she's a great resource for connecting families and residents with the resources that are available to them. So whether it's things to do with access to food, legal assistance, housing, veterans, well, there is the Veterans Affairs Department as well, but just a way to increase the access of our residents to the different the resources that are available to them. So I think, again, as I had mentioned before, increasing that awareness, whether it's through social media, traditional media, so that residents know that there is help available to them in the town hall. And she's a really great resource. So thank you.
Thanks, Rosemary. And you can stay on for this last question.
Okay.
This is our third question, the last of the Q&A before we will proceed with closing statements. So this is about youth and mental health. The New York Times reported last Sunday that depression, self-harm, and suicide are rising among American adolescents. In December, the U.S. Surgeon General warned of a, quote, devastating, unquote, mental health crisis among adolescents. Can you please share your thoughts on what Hingham can do to manage this crisis locally and support its teenage population?
Mm-hmm. This is something I feel really passionate about. I have 2 daughters, a 13-year-old and an 11-year-old, and I've seen firsthand how hard this has been on them and their peers. And I think this is where this access to a shared epidemiologist will also be so important. We'll have some really specific data pertaining to the specific mental health issues that are affecting our town and our young people especially. And then utilizing our town social worker and making that the awareness of that more available. I think we have a really wonderful opportunity using Harbor Media to do some public health campaigns, and then utilizing our social worker for things like establishing support groups, whether they're online or in person, and increasing access to education about, whether it's a public health campaign about some of the warning signs for if your child is experiencing a mental health issue. And then also just education about how to access resources. So in terms of, it's hard to speculate about what the risk is in our town. But once we have a little more data, and maybe it's something that the board can even collaborate with the school committee on in terms of surveying parents and young people in our town and really being able to hone in on where the need is. And I think education and access to resources is always so important.
Great. Thank you, Rosemary. Kirk, I'll invite you on to address this question, and I'll speak up. It's about youth and mental health, and I'll repeat it for you. Can you please share your thoughts on what Hingham can do to manage the crisis we talked about locally and support its teenage population, the crisis being rising incidents of depression, self-harm, and suicide among Hingham's youth or American youth?
Yes. So again, I'm running for re-election and I'm running on my record. So we never had a town social worker until it was my recommendation that we obtain one. My wife's in that space. She went to school to be an adjustment counselor. She's now a licensed clinical social worker. The town of Situate had a social worker, and it was the only town around that had one. I said, we need one here, because principally from hoarding, from the elderly population that has nobody to approach regarding that topic. They're embarrassed about it. You'd be surprised how many hoarders, elderly, that we have in Hingham. And that's where it began. And so we hired the first social worker, I don't know, about four years ago. And we just hired our second last year. And so she's coming on board. So as far as the social worker position, essential for all residents of Hingham, let's talk specifically about adolescents, because I'm also knowledgeable that, right? The school has adjustment counselors. There's social workers that work in the school. And so that is the perfect venue for students who have issues about depression go to see somebody because they're right there. It's a protected space, a comfortable space for the students. So I think that forces into young the counselors, making sure we have enough of them in the high school, in the middle school, and supporting their work. I mean, our town social can do those things, but I think that her perspective would be, the remaining part of the Hingham populace, because there's nobody for them. So again, the reason that we have made that happen, and
Kirk, I'm gonna interrupt you really quick. There's a pause in your audio, which might mean an opportunity to stop this one. So thank you. We're gonna go to closing statements now. We'll go in reverse ballot order for this one. So we'll start with Rosemary. Each of you will have up to 90 seconds to make a final closing statement. And Rosemary, begin whenever you're ready.
So over the past few years, I've seen more and more people that I know stepping into roles within the town government. And it really made me realize that so much of what happens in Hingham relies on the volunteer time and effort of people who live here. As I said before, I was born and raised here. I attended Boston College. I went on to earn my master's in nursing from Mass General Hospital Institute of Health Professions. I've worked in the medical field for 20 years. I've worked at the bedside at Mass General. I've worked in the community at Planned Parenthood. And I currently am an owner and clinical director of a practice in Randolph in the hyperbaric medical space. I'm used to looking at medicine or looking at health issues from a practical side within operations in an organization, and trying to optimize health needs while also making that fit within a structure of an organization. I have two daughters, one at Hingham Middle School and one at South Elementary. I've been very involved in the PTOs as well as many charities, including Habitat for Humanity, School on Wheels, Christmas in the City. I've been a coach with Hingham Youth Field Hockey. My family has always been committed to serving. My mother was a physician. Both her parents were physicians. My grandmother was the first woman appointed to the Wisconsin State Board of Health in 1957. My father was the president of the Hingham Community Center for several years. My parents really instilled a sense of caring for others into me. And my husband, TJ, and I really want to show our daughters the same, that it's time to step up and help. So I would be really honored for your support. I would love to help keep Hingham healthy and safe. And I ask for your vote on May 14th. Thank you. And thank you to the Unity Council and CPAC for supporting this.
Thank you, Rosemary, very much. Kirk, I'll invite you on, and you have 90 seconds to make a closing statement. Begin whenever you're ready.
I'm running for re-election to the Board of Health. The Board of Health has been run very well for a good number of years. We work well together, myself and the executive director and staff and the other Board of Health members. I'm similar to Rosemary. I'm in the health space. I'm a physician, been practicing for 39 years. So we understand the medical side and most likely the public health side. I've had some experience in that, Public Health Association member. And we do those things. We have every month we have a topic that we take on public health. This happens to be coming up in a couple of days, skin cancer awareness coming up, that the Board of Health promotes that. But going back to the purpose, and if you look at the statute, what boards of health do, their role, it is the things I talked about in the beginning. It is drinking water protection, septic system permitting design to protect the drinking water. That is the lion's share of what I am an expert at, more so than anybody in town. You know, Susan is, I'm behind her, but nobody else knows it as well. And that's very helpful with understanding that. The regulations that we voted on and to amend that Rosemary had mentioned for our town, you know, I wrote the language for that. We vote on the concepts, but I'm the one that put together the organization, the language. I'm the writer for the board, do most of the letters, almost that we produce. I appreciate, you know, board. I love it. You know, love serving this town that I was, as I born in, like Rose. I believe and know that I've made a difference, and that makes me feel great. And so I appreciate this opportunity to talk to everybody, and hope that you know, I do get reelected to the position, and I'll work my butt off as I had all along to make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirk. Thank you very much for your closing statement, and thank you to you and Rosemary for your willingness to participate in this forum. We are deeply grateful for your participation, and we wish both of you all the best of luck in the election. And thank you to our audiences for tuning in. We have one more, and Kirk will be a candidate for that one as well. So Kirk, stick around. As a reminder for folks, if you're just tuning in or intermittently tuning in, the election is Saturday, May 14th. The deadline to register to vote for the election is Wednesday, May 4th, and the town clerk's office will be open until 8 p.m. that day. And thank you very much for joining us. We have one forum left, and that is for Sewer Commission. We do have two candidates. We have Kirk and we have Joe. So Joe, thank you for being here. Kirk, thank you for being here. Just very quick, Kirk knows this, but Joe, for your benefit, quick overview of the rules. We'll start with opening statements. We'll have a 2-minute opening statement for each of you. We will go in ballot order. I will then ask 3 questions in alternating order. Those questions have all been provided in advance for y'all. And then at the end, we will have a closing statement of 90 seconds, and we will go in reverse ballot order for that. And that will conclude our evening. So in this instance, Kirk, you're up first. For those of you just tuning in, Kirk is a candidate both for the Board of Health and for the Sewer Commission. And so, Kirk, I invite you to make a opening statement about your candidacy for Sewer Commission whenever you're ready. You'll have 2 minutes.
Andrew, I see that I'm on the screen, so my guess is I have 2 minutes for an opening statement. I couldn't hear, which is unfortunate.
Yes, sir. 2 minutes whenever you're ready. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay. It's okay, Andrew. I can hear you now. So I'm running for re-election to the Sewer Commission because the Sewer Commission and the Board of Health, we do the same type of functions within the town. One, we pipe the wastewater. The other, we distribute the water into the ground. They're related. I was chair and on the Hingham Master Wastewater Planning Committee throughout its tenure. And so I'm intimately familiar with both the Board of Health regulations and statutes and the sewer. And that's why I was asked by a number of people within the town to go on the Sewer Commission, because at the time, we as a town meeting decided to change the structure of the sewer department to break off having the Sewer Commission oversee all of the operations and just have the commission look at planning, financing, and policy, and then having the DPW run the day-to-day operations. So they said, Kirk, you know, with your expertise and organization, can you go on there? Because we have to figure out how we're going to move forward with a Sewer Commission in the future. Because at the time, as all you remember or should know, we were in the process of purchasing our water company, studying that. And we knew that there was going to be a change at some point. And do we have a combined sewer? We'll figure out. 2 minutes are over because I see that you're back, Andrew. There we go. And I'll be quiet
now. Kirk, you're being a good sport. Thank you for hanging in there with us. Thank you for that opening statement. Joe's the other candidate for the Sewer Commission. And Joe, I invite you whenever you're ready to start your opening statement. You'll have 2 minutes.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here. Save the best for last, I guess. It's the everybody's favorite sewer commission discussion. I want to start by thanking Kirk for his many years of service to the town of Hingham. He's been an incredible volunteer for the town, and I also want to thank the Hingham Unity Council for all the work that they do in the town and putting this forum together. So, for those folks that don't know me, my name is Joe Kelly. I am the father of 5 children. I have children in the Hingham Middle School, South Elementary, children in diapers who will go to the South Elementary School hopefully sooner rather than later. And my wife and I we really believe in the volunteerism of the town of Hingham. Like, this town is an incredible place, unlike anywhere else on the South Shore. It's this volunteer spirit that makes the town of Hingham what it is. My wife and I are completely committed to the volunteerism of the service of the town of Hingham. My wife currently serves as the chair of the Conservation Commission. I serve the town of Hingham now on the Public Safety Building Committee, which I'm sure we're all looking forward to talking about on Saturday. And and I'm looking to increase my volunteerism in the town. I serve right now as an assistant. I did say Little League coach, but it's a Babe Ruth coach. Go Giants. We had a game tonight. And the reason I'm going for the sewer commission this time around is because I have coming up on 23 years of experience in the construction, maintenance, and utility industry. And this happens to be an industry that I work in every day. I actually have a license to operate a lot of the equipment that we use to dig up streets. And I could jump in that backhoe and start digging if necessary, though I won't. But and I'm looking to bring that personal experience. I would also be the only person. Well, I don't know. I would bring my youth and a new vision to the sewer commission. It's there are a lot of new technologies and a lot of new things that people that aren't in the industry aren't aware of. And we can be doing a lot of things that will benefit the ratepayers. They will benefit the town. And most importantly, we need to make sure that we're protecting our aquifer. And this is directly one of the things that the sewer commission has some control with. And I think I saw the stop sign. Sorry.
Yes, thank you, Joe. It's okay. Like I said, we want to make sure folks have a chance to finish up their thought. I will go off script for a minute here and say, Joe, the town is tearing up our street right now, replacing all the water pipes. So I look forward to seeing you in that backhoe. you can actually stay on. You can actually stay on the screen for this question.
Okay.
We'll start with you for this one. So this evening, the Sewer Commission held a public hearing to discuss proposed updates to the town's sewer regulations. The current regulations were last promulgated on April 5th, 2016. And so, Joe, the question for you is, are there any gaps in the updates that the commission is proposing? And what additions or modifications, if any, would you propose?
So I will say I was the only member of the public at that sewer commission meeting until the last 5 minutes when somebody came in just prior to the end of the meeting. And it was a very informative meeting, right? We're taking the old sewer regulation there, and we've cleaned it up a little bit. I believe there were 3 changes to it, and I thank Kirk for his time. Kirk wrote all of the new regulations that will be added. Some of them I think are important that we absolutely need to address. They're common sense solutions, and some of them I have some issues with. Regulation changes. I did prepare a little bit of an answer, so I do want to kind of it'll help me stay on time too. Regulation changes are mostly are about regulating private sewer connections, right? So facilities range from the Beals Cove, 3 condo associations, the 40B, the Beal Cove apartments, and Lynchfield. And these regulations are designed to promote documenting the systems and establishing financial responsibility should the town of Hingham need to assist. And this is an important regulation that we need to put into place. But the criteria for the inspections should be periodic. In this new proposal, it limits these inspections to title changes. So every building will have a different standard for when we inspect those pipes. And we're also putting the onus on inspecting those pipes and drainage systems on the seller of the unit, right? So we are concerned with adding costs to sales. How do we regulate that? Is it even legal to force people to have a private contractor come in and tell them that their sewer system is? I mean, it is the Title V law, but the sewer system is not Title V. It is different. So there are some serious challenges and concerns that the sewer commission is going to need to address. The town council is going to need to address, and I'm actually concerned because it creates an equity gap for people who are selling the house and maybe have to sell their house and maybe can't afford to have a plumbing and drain company come in and replace their entire drain system because there's a root, and it shows that the inflow there's an I&I problem in their drain system. So we could put huge burdens on people that are simply trying to sell their home, and we don't even have a mechanism in place where we may be able to facilitate that. So I do have some issues with that. I did make those concerns public tonight at that meeting, and that's my position on it.
Thank you, Joe. We'll have to stop there. Kirk, I'll invite you on for the answer to the first question here. The question is, and we'll, to be fair, we'll provide a little extra time if you feel like you need it, just to be fair with Joe's answer. The question is, why does the Sewer Commission feel the regulations need to be updated? And can you briefly tell voters why these are the right changes?
Cool. And I'm thrilled Joe was there tonight, because Joe had a chance to see what we have within the town relative to the Sewer Commission and also the Sewer Department through the DPW and the administration. It has a fair amount of function, because the Sewer Commission doesn't have an executive director. We have nobody. It's just three of us. So Joe mentioned the regulations. You know, I'm only in my second term on the Sewer Commission. We've been working on those regulations for 6 years. We've talked about it meeting after meeting with staff, among all the various sewer commissioners, and we got together, hey, this is the best way that we think that we can put together a plan to correct a known fault within the town that's costing sewer ratepayers money by our paying for infiltration and inflow, just extra water going in the system. And so, we voted on it back in July of last year, July. And in the motion, we said we'd like to get an opinion from town council on these regulations to see if any have a violation of statute. Today is what? Today's April. August, September, October, November, December, January, February, March. Haven't got anything. And we heard about that he might have done an email with Randy today. Hey, no heard opinion. There's nothing. There's dysfunction on, and that's one of the reasons I'm there, to help it. Because the Sewer Commission, again, we have nobody to help us. And I'm going to do my best. And we're getting things done. As Joe heard, we passed some of the regulation, but we need to work on others. I see the big old stop sign. I know to stop talking now.
That's right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kirk. You can stay on for this question, since we're flip-flopping back and forth. This will be our second of three. This has to do with the diversity of the vendor base. So I'll speak up on this one. Only contractors on the list of approved drain layers licensed through the Hingham Sewer Department office are authorized to excavate any sewer lines in town for the purpose of repairing, replacing, or installing service lines. As of mid-April of this year, 2022, the Sewer Commission had 28 vendors that were approved drain layers for fiscal year 2022. So Kirk, my question for you is, You are the incumbent candidate in this race and a current member of the commission. How many of the 28 vendors on this list are Black, women, or minority-owned businesses? And are you satisfied with that number?
Is it to me, Joe?
Yes, sir.
I mean,
Yes,
Andrew?
sir. You. Go.
Okay. All right. So that diversity related question is most appropriately directed at the Board of Selectmen who would set that policy for the town. That is not a sewer commission topic. That is the selectmen. And hopefully you get a chance to, appear before them and get your point across. But asking that of a sewer commissioner seems rather, it's not applicable. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Kurt. Joe, I'll go to you. What specific proposals do you have to increase the number of Black, women, and minority-owned businesses that do business with the town of Hingham?
So I kind of will probably piggyback a little bit on Kirk's response here in that there isn't a ton that the sewer commission can do. However, I'm a person that likes to work collaboratively with people. I look to find solutions to problems that we can all agree that need to be resolved. I think everybody is aware that this is an issue that needs to be resolved. I happen to belong to an organization that over the last 10 years has committed extensive resources into providing apprenticeships and licensing training and business opportunities for women, people of color, and other minorities to become licensed professionals in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and to help them start businesses. They are not laying drain pipes, however, but that doesn't mean that other organizations aren't out there doing it. That doesn't mean that these folks aren't out there. And I believe that, through the town administrator and the board, the select board, that we should be able to come up with a more extensive list. But we can all be, volunteer citizens in this town, and I can pick up the telephone tomorrow and reach out to the Department of Professional Licensure and reach out to minority business groups that do promote the hiring of these contractors. We are going to take them off the list. They take people and put them on a list. It's not going to guarantee that certain contractors get jobs, but we should at least be adding folks to the list that are going to communicate a value that we all want to promote in the town of Hingham. And I think that is done simply with a couple of phone calls. And I don't think we have to completely pass it on to the town administrator or the Board of Selectmen.
Great. Thank you, Joe. Joe, you can stay on for the last question here. It's our third and final question before we'll ask for closing statements from each of you. This is about access to town sewer. The Hingham Master Plan notes that there were approximately 8,750 households in Hingham as of 2018. And the Sewer Commission's website notes that the North and Weir River Sewer Districts serve approximately 2,275 businesses and residences. The Hingham Master Plan estimates that approximately 40% of the town is on public sewer in these districts. The rest are served by septic systems. So Joe, the question for you is, the draft Hingham Master Plan notes that 10 years ago in 2010, the town meeting voted to create a South Hingham Sewer District and a study to connect the district to the Massachusetts Water Resource Authority's sewer system. But the town subsequently found that connecting to the MWRA could be cost prohibitive, and limited progress has been made toward identifying a feasible long-term solution. That is a quote from the draft master plan. If elected, what would you do to provide leadership on this issue to make progress?
Great. So the sewer district expansion is still like desperately needed in environmentally sensitive areas, especially anything close to coastal waters or where ledge is common, right? It's like we know that septic systems are not going to be beneficial there. Some believe that adding sewers to areas like World's End or other parts of Hingham, they may encourage monster houses to be built on tiny lots. Prices in Hingham are so high right now that large houses are being built on small lots already anyway. That's already happening. And we see that just driving down the street. And because septic systems are only inspected when the property changes hands and some grandfather systems remain, and an owner with a failed system may not be able to be motivated to replace it until the house is about to be sold. South Hingham seems to lack critical mass and available land for leaching fields or even a treatment plant. So a joint project between Hingham and Rockland and Norwell and maybe Weymouth, it's probably something that we should look into. We should probably maybe create a feasibility study and figure out if we can maybe collaboratively come together to meet the needs of all of those towns. The lack of water might also be a problem. The MWRA, they closed the district, so preventing Hingham from adding to the North District and preventing towns like Hull or Cohasset from connecting. So it is going to be an issue. And the number one, in my view, the number one thing that we have to be cognizant of is protecting our water source and protecting our coastal inlets. We cannot pollute the Ware River because we don't have the stomach to pump into the sewer system. We just can't do it. It's not the right thing to do.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Joe. Kirk, I'll invite you on for your response to this question. And actually, a little bit of a different framing for you is, do you believe more residents in Hingham should be connected to town sewer infrastructure? And would you support creating a South Hingham sewer district to serve the residents in that portion of town?
Back in 2004, town meeting appropriated $300,000 to study where we need additional sewer needs within the town of Hingham. That was the committee that I chaired. We've done that. We spent the money. We have a plan. We put together the plan. We wrote the plan. And it calls for looking at the South Hingham area, not from the perspective of the environment. The reason that we chose South Hingham was for the economic benefit to the town as a whole. And so we set up a district, went to town meeting a couple of years, and we have that currently. The problem is that the property owners in South Hingham, on the other side of Route 3, and also right along the corridor where the Bristol Brothers properties are, they're not prepared to to build things like housing that we would require a sewer system to be built there, because Weymouth won't allow us to connect it from South Hingham. Abington Rockland doesn't have the capacity, so we can't connect there. So the plan was to put our own decentralized sewer plant in the South Hingham area. And there's an advantage to that. That would add water to our groundwater to water. So the most important is sewering the old town is a terrible idea because we derive our drinking water from the town, and septic systems, I think the statistic is 23% of the water from septic systems gets recycled back into the aquifer water. That's why it's so. It exists, but we don't have property owners want to act going forward with it. So when they're ready, we will be ready too.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kirk. I will now invite the candidates to make their closing statements. And as I mentioned, we will proceed in reverse ballot order. And that means, Joe, we will start with you. Whenever you're ready, you'll have 90 seconds.
Okay, I think it's late. I think everybody did a terrific job tonight. I'm excited to be elected to the Sewer Commission. I'm asking for your vote in the election. I have 23 years experience. My wife and I and strong, committed volunteers here in the town of Hingham. I look forward to serving you on the Sewer Commission. And I want to thank the Hingham Unity Council for putting this together. I want to thank Kirk for his many years of service to the town of Hingham. And again, my name is Joe Kelly. I'm asking for your vote for the Sewer Commission on election day. And please attend town meeting on Saturday.
Thank you, Joe. Kirk, whenever you're ready, you can start your closing statement. You'll have 90 seconds. Whenever you're ready, Kirk, go ahead.
I'll assume it's my turn.
Your turn.
Okay. Is everyone else having the same issues? I mean, it can't be me because, you know, it's unfortunate the technology is so bad tonight, because I'd love to hear what Joe had to say and Miss Mary Ellen too. So I'm running for re-election to the Sewer Commission because I have the experience and the knowledge to be able to actually get things done. And we're in a transition period currently. And so at some point, you know, I'm not going to stay on the Sewer Commission. I think it'll morph into something else. But right now, while we're going through that transition, I think I'm the best person for that job. I've shown that I can do the work, done it well. And I hope that people will send me back, and not only to the Sewer Commission, but the Board of Health, because of the synergy between the two agencies. And geez, I just, you know, I got to be honest with you. I just wish we had a better forum here, because these are fabulous questions. And Joe and Mary, they're both very interesting people. I'd love to hear what they had to say. And it was hard tonight. And so it's a disappointment. You can hear it in my voice. But other than that, I look forward to, if it is taped, maybe it's something we can look up and review what the other people said, including myself. But, you know, thank you very much for having us tonight. And, you know, I hope to be able to continue the town in the roles that I have now, that I know I've done a very good job at. And so thank you very much.
Thank you, Kirk. Thank you so much for being here. And I do appreciate your patience and everyone's patience in dealing with some of the technology. We've been at it for a couple of years now, but it doesn't seem to get any easier sometimes. So that concludes our forum for the evening, folks. Thank you for those of you that stick with us through the whole 2 hours and 36 minutes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I want to extend a big thank you to all of the candidates for your willingness to participate in this forum. We wish all of you the best of luck in the election. And thank you to our audiences, our live stream audiences, for tuning in. Kirk, a recording of this forum will be available on the Hingham Unity Council Facebook and YouTube pages and the Hingham Unity Council website. So for anybody, candidates, audience members, other folks in the public that weren't here this evening, this will be made public so that folks can watch the whole thing again if they'd like, or of course, fast forward to the points that they'd like to tune into. The election is Saturday, May 14th. The deadline to register to vote for this election is Wednesday, May 4th, and the town clerk's office will be open until 8 p.m. that day. Thank you for joining us. Please remember to vote on May 14th. And as others have said, town meeting is this Saturday, April 30th, and look forward to that as well. Lastly, please also visit the Hingham Unity Council website at hinghamunity.org for more upcoming events, including our community book read of Interior Chinatown on Thursday, May 12th at 7 p.m. and the hashtag We Are Hingham event on Sunday, May 22nd at 2 p.m. at the Jane Cheever Carr Amphitheater at the South Shore Conservatory. Really quickly, let me thank a couple more folks. Hingham CPAC, thank you very much for your co-participation in this. Thank you, Amy, for being our fearless clock person. And thank you to Stephanie, who managed the technology across 11 different people, 4 different forums, and 2.5 hours this evening. Thank you very much. Have a good evening, everyone. Good night. Goodbye.